Double J, Jeff Jarrett here to tell you about SaveWithConrad.com. You've heard Conrad talk about the total nonstop savings they provided current homeowners. But did you know Conrad and his team can also help My World listeners become homeowners? They make buying a home easier than getting the bag after a good housekeeping match. But don't take the Last Outlaw's word for it.
Franklin Dove, Orlando, Florida. After listening to all of Conrad's podcasts and hearing the different stories that he shared, I felt the time was right for me to explore buying a home again, and reached out, and one thing led to another, and finally closed last week. It was excellent. Everything flowed smoothly from my first contact. I just put in the initial request online. Francis reached out. We started the application process, got the approval moving. Holly was great. Larry Thompson was amazing. Everything was smooth. Communication was perfect. Really, it was a much better experience than anything that I could have imagined. My name is Franklin Dove in Orlando, Florida, and I got into my dream home thanks to SaveWithConrad.com.
That's right. In my world, it doesn't get any better than 5 stars. Don't let your landlord get over on you. Walk out on that bad deal and stop throwing your money away on rent today with SaveWithConrad.com. That's right. It's SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. Woo!
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to 83 Weeks. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer himself, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eric Bischoff. Eric, how are you, man?
I am just rolling, Conrad, just rolling.
All right. I like the sound of that.
But in the more traditional version of the term, not in the drug-addled term. So I'm good. Yeah, I'm really good.
I didn't assume you had a bunch of ecstasy for breakfast this morning, but we do appreciate you guys.
But this could be ecstasy. This show could be. You never know.
Here's what we're doing today. We're doing something kind of fun. Of course, we're going to catch up on all the latest moving and shaking in the world of professional wrestling, but we'll do that through the course of our conversation as we watch an old school Nitro, if you will, August 31st, 1998. Our plan was to watch this, but we could have never predicted what was going to happen with CM Punk and All Elite Wrestling, so that sort of took precedent. So we're going to pick up where we left off. We want you to watch along with us. Get your Peacock out. It's season 4, episode 35. This is the 3-hour era of Nitro. So it's going to be about a 2.5-hour watch along all told. That'll give us plenty of time to talk about what was going on in 1998 and what's going on today. So without further ado, Eric, let's jump right into it, man. This is Nitro from August 31st, 1998. One more time, if you're watching along with us on Peacock for a second screen experience, if you will, that's season 4, episode 35. Look up Nitro, season 4, episode 35. And I think we're ready for it. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, play.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are inside of 2 weeks for Raw, and you're looking live downtown Miami, Florida, as South Florida welcomes Nitro. TNT is on the air for 3 hours live. It's Tony Schiavone, Mike today, and the one, the only living legend, Larry Zbyszko. Very familiar tunes, Mike, today, because here comes...
So how about this entrance, man? Is this one day when somebody wants to talk about the legacy of Eric Bischoff, they'll talk about you coming through that tunnel. I mean, this clip of you coming through the Nitro set at an angle with all the smoke and Hulk Hogan behind you, like that's probably what people are going to associate you with more than anything else, right? As far as on camera.
I think so. I think my on-camera career started at about 1989 in the AWA. Ended up hosting a Monday through Friday show on ESPN for Vern, believe it or not. It aired in the Midwest where I lived in Minneapolis. It aired at 3:00 in the afternoon, but it was still, it was 5 days a week. And then, of course, my early work in WCW and even afterwards, in WWE, brief stint in TNA, which I wish people would really forget, to be honest, but they won't. But of all the things that I've really been on camera for the better part of 30 years, and of that 30, about 6 or 8 of it was pretty high profile, maybe a little more. But I think you're right. This is the most familiar. I think this is what matters the most. I think to when people think about WCW and Nitro and the Monday Night Wars, and being a part of that will something I'll be carrying around for a long time.
Well, we're still carrying around the legacy of the NWO, and you might say to yourself, why exactly are Conrad and Eric watching this old Nitro from Miami, August 31st, 1998? This is the most watched Monday Nitro in the history of the show. This is the day after SummerSlam 1998. And the reason this is the most watched show in history of Nitro isn't because no one cared about what was going on with SummerSlam 98 on that highway to hell with The Undertaker and Stone Cold. It's because Raw that night was preempted by the US Open. So it's a big opportunity for people who maybe are Joneses or their wrestling fix. There's no competition. So it's just you guys. You're about 3 weeks removed from Road Wild. That's where we had Jay Leno in the main event. We've covered that in the archives over 83 weeks on youtube.com. But as you heard, we're sort of home stretching it here for Fall Brawl. This opportunity to be unopposed, I mean, this was really a chance to hit the reset button on these Monday Night Wars. I mean, this was a chance for you to gain some ground if you felt like you had lost some, right?
Oh, well, we had, we were beginning to lose some for sure. But it's not so much, I think, that people were jonesing for wrestling because WWE was preempted. But I do believe that there's just a lot of people going back and forth during that Monday Night War era. And it was a great opportunity for us to capture what would otherwise probably be a more WWE dominant audience for them, and capture them for extended periods of time. And in this case, we got a 3-hour show. So we had the platform or the stage to ourselves without people flipping back and forth, and definitely wanted to take advantage of that.
You're trying to set up War Games here in the promo. You are doing a Bischoff, or you and Hogan are doing a promo here saying that Stevie Ray is going to be the third man on the War Games team. And you're going to say that you're forcing Eddie Guerrero to wrestle on the show. And according to Dave Meltzer, Hogan mentioned something about Ultimate Warrior, but they edited out Ultimate and called him a coward and asked him to come out. This is a show on a 7-second delay, so no naughty words like Ultimate air, since the wrestlers are having a hard time these days not saying naughty words. So before we get into the Ultimate Warrior appearance, which is going to come up on our screen here in a moment, the 7-second delay is something you and I have never really spent any time talking about. It's pretty common in radio and television, certainly live. I know in radio they call it the old dump button. But occasionally you would have a guy go out there and get a little overzealous. And I know Sean Waltman got a little excited and said a bad word here or there. The camera picks it up and he gets reprimanded. But in this case, it's not necessarily a 4-letter word, but it's simply a function of one of the guys forgetting, oh yeah, that is actually a WWF trademark. We can't say Ultimate Warrior. Do you remember any other times that the 7-second delay button came in handy, or what specifically became the catalyst for thinking, okay, maybe we need one?
Oh, I think as soon as we went live and the decision was made early, before we fired up a camera for the very first Nitro, we knew we were going to be going live, and the network, I think it was a policy for them that on live broadcasts that there's a 7-second delay, regardless of whether it's wrestling or football or anything else. So not unusual.
I know that this is had to be a sensitive topic for legal at the time, because you did have all of this going on with the Scott Hall and Kevin Nash lawsuit about Diesel and Razor with the WWF, but bleeping the word ultimate. Obviously that's just force of habit, slip of the tongue, not intentional. Was there ever something where you felt like someone did that intentionally, or is it always just an honest mistake?
No, it's always an honest mistake, and to this day, I think all of us who have known people for a long time. And, I don't know about you, but I just out of respect, I always refer to people, even if they're close friends of mine, by their character name. I just do. Unless it's a more serious conversation or perhaps we're just in private. But when I refer to,
Mhm.
I don't refer to Terry Bollea very often. I often refer to Hulk Hogan. When we talk on the phone, it's, hey, Hulk, how you doing? It's not, hey, Terry, how you doing? So I think when you've been around the industry long enough and you get used to that culture and out of respect, referring to people as their character names, sometimes it's hard to unprogram yourself, and go, oh, wait a minute. No, there's a copyright trademark, problem here. I better remind myself to call someone something different. That doesn't happen, especially when you're fired up, you're getting yourself psyched up, you're going out there to cut a promo, and it happens. The 7-second delay came in. Oftentimes it became more valuable when there was action going on outside of the ring. Occasionally people, talent inside of the ring during a promo would, drop an F-bomb or something similar. And that's obvious. But more often than not, the 7-second delay came in handy when there was action going on outside of the ring. Because it gets a little bit, not all the time, but can get a lot more intense. And then you've got the crowd right there. The camera mics are going to pick up more ambient sound. So when you get outside of that ring and you're, a foot and a half away from the crowd and they're fired up and they're pissed off, you're going to hear about it, a lot of it. And that's probably when the 7-second delay got used more often than any other time.
Well, it's a big crowd here to see the Ultimate Warrior. Lots of special effects, lots of lighting, lots of pyro. 12,481 fans here. It's a sellout. $286,000 at the gate. Meltzer would say Warrior got a big pop the first time he came out. And in his case, when it comes to drawing money, they feel correctly that less is definitely more. I'm still trying to figure out how Bischoff is running WCW when Harvey Schiller didn't even want to hear about him taking a leak in the men's room. Let's talk about where WCW is at this point creatively. I mean, what's creative the team for WCW look like? I mean, obviously you're involved. Kevin Sullivan's involved. As I understand it, Kevin Nash is starting to contribute a little more. Who else would be sort of steering the ship creatively by the summer of 98?
Summer of 98, Terry Taylor may have been there. Terry was kind of in and out a couple times during the period of time when I was in charge of WCW, but in all likelihood, Terry Taylor was there. Craig Leathers, our director, would have been part of it. I thought it was important for as often as possible. It wasn't possible every single week, but as often as possible. I liked Craig to sit in on the meetings because the better idea your director has of the picture that you're trying to paint, the more likely it's going to come off the way you want it to come off. So in other words, if a director is only going to see the format an hour before the show or 2 hours before the show, it's really hard to get a feel for the intention and the direction and the goals that you're really trying to achieve on a specific episode. Because some of it is nuanced. It's not always obvious. You could be planting seeds. You could be, trying to nurture a part of a story along, and you don't want it to become too obvious. But it's still important that it gets covered. So I would often have Craig in there. Annette Yoder would be in there. Tony, I think, was in and out. Tony Schiavone. Can't really remember during 98 if he would have been participating or not. But I always liked having Tony in there as well, for the same reason that I like to have Craig in, Craig Leathers, the directors, because if the announcers got a feel and is part of the creative process, it's much more likely that the play-by-play and the color will flow in the direction you want it to be and feel like it's part of the show as opposed to kind of remote and not really being attached to the process.
So this is an interesting thing I want to talk about, because if you're watching along with us, and we hope you are, over either on Peacock or 83 weeks on youtube.com, we started the show with your entrance and then an in-ring promo with you and Hogan, where Warrior interrupts. We get the big smoke effect. Where did he go? Ooh, it's so spooky. But then we get the Nitro open, and then we see Tony and Mike Tenay and Larry Zbyszko at the desk. And I've seen a lot of television shows do that before, but it wasn't something that wrestling did a lot, where you get like a teaser of here's what to expect on today's episode, then the open. You would see that in other television, but not too often in wrestling. Who would have been an advocate for that as opposed to just opening with the standard Nitro open?
That was my decision. I tinkered with the open a lot. I tried doing things differently to see which worked best. I firmly believe that if you can hook the audience, if you could tell and I learned it from somebody who was far more experienced in television than I was at the time, but I learned how important the opening few moments of a show is, because you're essentially telling the viewer how to watch the show and what to anticipate without it being a graphic or a typical card rundown show open, because people don't pay attention to that. They kind of tune out. It's almost like background noise. But by configuring the open, the first 2-3 minutes of the show differently, you have a chance to make the show feel special, especially if you don't do the same thing every week. I could talk a long time about show opens because I've been adamant about it. It was one of the things that I really wanted to try to address when I had my cup of coffee in WWE back in 2019, is because I felt like the show opens it just didn't do a great job of threading the stories and telling the audience how to watch the show and what to anticipate. But I broached this subject once, I think probably about a month after I first got there. And the people on my team that have been there for a while, a couple of them said, "Oh, you might not want to bring that up. Kevin Dunn hates that. I wouldn't bring that up if I were you." I thought, okay, I'm not going to bring it up right now because, the ink's still dry on my contract, or I didn't have a contract, but the ink's still dry on my employment documents. I'll let that dry and I'm going to come back at it. But yeah, I loved messing around with opens. Did it a lot in TNA as well. Sometimes I'd like to start a show almost in action, like without a ring announcer, just jumpstart the show. Because that creates the sense of, holy crap, it reinforces the fact, number one, that you're live, because you're not doing the same thing the same way every single week. It also kind of creates a little bit of a subconscious urgency in the viewer. You're training the viewer to be sure that they tune in on time. Make sure it's a way of reinforcing the whole concept of appointment television, which isn't really that relevant today, and I get that, but I still think for live television, the first opening moments of a show is critically important, just as important as the final 2 or 3 minutes of a show.
This is a pretty historic moment between segments here. So we've got a match in the ring right now with Brian Clark doing his thing against Jim Powers. But before, we saw a package from earlier in the day where Goldberg went to visit the Miami Marlins and the visiting St. Louis Cardinals. Mark McGwire is in the middle of the biggest story in sports in 1998. And as a reminder, we're just a few weeks really removed, or I guess several weeks at this point, with Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone. And they're, of course, in the NBA Finals, and now they're going to be in a wrestling ring. That's a hot property for WCW. But to see Goldberg hanging out with Mark McGwire in the middle of really what brought baseball back after a few dark years, including a strike, it was the home run chase, the chase for Roger Maris's record between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. Who's going to get there first? It felt like both of these guys had all this momentum, and baseball for the first time in a while was really exciting, and it was selling more tickets and getting more coverage. It was no longer, it was starting to feel more rather like America's pastime again. So to just have the opportunity to have Mark McGwire and Goldberg on camera together, that's a big deal for WCW, is it not?
It certainly was a big deal, like you pointed out. Mark McGuire was in the headlines on a regular basis, especially at this time of the year, as you're heading into playoff season, chasing a record, all of those good things. And you know that every morning your sports writers are talking about it. Your AM morning drive, FM morning drive radio hosts are talking about it. So yeah, to have WCW once again aligned with Major League Baseball, especially with someone at this high profile, coming off of Karl Malone and Dennis Rodman and the profile that they had early in the summer, is pretty awesome. It gave us a lot of credibility and made us a little more sponsor friendly.
We got to at least ask, because it was written in the Observer that you guys would have. Here's the exact quote. And yes, WCW is interested in having McGuire wrestle after the season is over, although that deal is probably not even in the preliminary stages. Obviously, doing anything with Mark McGuire in a wrestling ring would have been huge in 1998. Was it ever seriously considered or discussed?
Only in Dave's warped mind.
Okay.
Or Sub Stooge. I'm gonna tell Dave this and let him know. We're talking about it and see if he's dumb enough to print it. And of course, he would be. Because that's what Dave does. But there was never a syllable of conversation, unless somebody was joking about it in the car on the way to the hotel room after the show was over or something. No, that's the silliest damn thing I've ever heard. But typical Dave Meltzer bullshit.
We saw a squash match there. They took a break. We will too. We'll go ahead and hit pause right now because here's what's typical, right? Tickets start moving for something. You get excited. Maybe somebody in your family, your household, your kids really want to go see something. You're like, yeah, Dad'll take you. No big deal. And then life gets in the way, and now it's sold out. What do we do? Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for everything you're looking for. Sports, music, comedy, theater. They've got killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. And that means you can stop stressing over tickets, start getting hyped for the fun you'll have with your friends and family. Seriously, I absolutely love Game Time. This has been something that has been a part of my life for, I guess, the better part of a year now. And I've used it multiple times, including this year's WrestleMania. Yeah, I got my WrestleMania tickets from Game Time. Here's what I like best about Game Time. Sometimes I take a look at a seat map and I say to myself, hey, is that even a good seat? I don't really know. But you get images of seat views with Game Time. So they'll have the layout that you would see, except now it's almost three-dimensional. So you kind of know what to expect when you sit down. Not only that, you can buy with real peace of mind. And this might be my favorite part of the Game Time offer. They have something called the Game Time Guarantee, where they guarantee you always get the best price. Let me explain. If you find tickets in the same section and the same row for less money, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So not only do you know exactly what your seats are going to look like before you sit down, you know the guy sitting to your left and to your right, you probably got a better deal than they did. How do you beat that? You get these exclusive flash deals on everything from football to basketball to baseball to concerts to comedy and theater and more. And you don't have to worry about doing this months in advance, guys. Game Time lets you do this the day of the event. How's that? Not only that, it's just 2 taps and boom, the tickets are in your phone. You don't even have to go digging through your email. I highly recommend this if you're looking to take the family out to something, if you're looking to see when WWE's coming to your area again. And by the way, they're selling out left and right. Get a great seat at a great price for you and the whole fam using Game Time. Snag those tickets without the stress with Game Time, folks. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our code WEEKS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code WEEKS. That's WEEKS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
So and by the way, I just used, not to interrupt you, Conrad, I'm sorry, but just used Game Time a couple weeks ago. Lori and I are going to Minneapolis to hang out with my brother and sister over Thanksgiving. Kind of a tradition we've been doing now for a few years. And I found out that the Eagles are going to be there.
Oh, hell yeah.
Pretty close to when we were going to go anyway. So I talked to Lori and said, hey, let's kind of modify our schedule a little bit so we could get into Minneapolis a little earlier than we planned and use game time to pick up tickets to the Eagles. So the cool part is, because it's been a long time since I've been in the arena there, but you can literally see perspective from your seats and what it's going to look like, which I thought was really freaking cool.
Check it out. Download that Game Time app. You'll be glad you did. And let's get back to our Nitro watch along here. So this is the last day of August, 1998. We just saw Wrath in a squash match. He beat Jim Powers. And now we'll pick it up where we were in 3, 2, 1, play. And I wanted to ask you about Wrath because, man, fans at the time, they were really wondering, is this going to be like the next guy to get the big gold bush? He was featured in a lot of quote-unquote squash matches or matches here on Nitro and Thunder at the time. And he was usually getting pretty dominant and pretty quick wins. And I know that, a couple years down the road, we're going to try that Goldberg streak again with the Millennium Man with Sid Vicious. But was there an opportunity or a consideration of, hey, man, maybe we can do some of that treatment for Wrath? He's a big guy with a great look. We could probably build a worthwhile opponent for Goldberg if we just use that same formula.
Yeah, I don't think the formula was anything really innovative. It had been, big guys coming in and squashing people has been kind of a staple in the wrestling formula for decades. It's how you make it's how Hulk Hogan was built. Before it's how when I first saw Hulk Hogan wrestle in the AWA, that was the methodology, if you will, when it came to creative. So it wasn't anything innovative, but I don't think we were trying to emulate the Goldberg formula per se, but certainly wanted to draw attention to the fact that Wrath was a big, powerful, tough-looking, intimidating character, and certainly by having him go in and squashing people, it just reinforced that. But I don't think there was any effort to really kind of dip into the Goldberg well.
The Nitro Party, if you're watching along with us, is alive and well. It's still a big part of the programming here, and I'm sure contesting and sponsorship. And it just really adds a more party vibe. We're getting ready to see Scott Norton and Norman Smiley in the in-ring here. But I wanted to ask you briefly about a little bit of legal issue that is written about in the Observer, and this might be a longer discussion. But Dave writes, lots of front office dissension, even more than wrestling dissension, which may account for the poor product quality. Nick Lambrose, whose official title was Vice President of Business Affairs, left the company basically after losing a power play to Bischoff. Officially, since Lambrose has a contract with Turner, he's been moved to an executive position with Turner's attempted new football league venture. This is something you and I haven't spent a lot of time talking about. The insinuation here is that Nick Lambrose tried to pull a power play on you. It didn't work, and his ass got reassigned. Is that real?
In essence, yes.
Okay.
It was more complicated. Not more complicated, but I really, really liked Nick Lambrose, and he was a very talented, very smart guy. And I enjoyed working with Nick for a long time. But this is, you and I we've talked about this kind of thing before. Right around this time, August of 98, into July, first part of August, 98, this period of time is when I realized that WCW were on the verge of getting fucked over by Turner Broadcasting.
Okay.
The handwriting became very apparent that as a result of Merger Mania, there was just a lot of jockeying for position. It's not just WCW was, a hamster or a pimple on a hamster's ass at that point, compared to everything else that was going on in Turner. But within the Turner executive structure, there was a lot of drama and power play going on. And Nick Harvey was caught up in it. I think Harvey wanted to be the president of TBS. There's no doubt in my mind. I think Harvey's focus, and Harvey, you know, the great thing about, and I know it sounds critical of Harvey, but it's not. But Harvey, I loved working for Harvey. First of all, he's really, really freaking smart, like way smarter than anybody else I'd ever worked with. And I like working with and around smart people because you learn shit, right? It makes you better generally. And Harvey was also very straightforward. Like, he'd look you in the eye and tell you exactly what he thought. And there's nothing I appreciate more in a human being, but especially someone that you report to. I love having a boss that would, you know, good news, bad news, whatever, look me in the eye without blinking and tell me what you really feel. Because I can work with that. What's hard to work with is the corporate speak and the HR speak and people that don't have the strength of character to really be honest and communicate clearly. Harvey had all that, but Harvey also had much greater aspirations, I think, in Turner. He saw himself and the opportunity to become president of TBS. I saw that. I also, because Nick was way more in tune with the corporate side of things than I was, because that's where he came from. Nick came out of the legal department. So he's in Turner Broadcasting. So he had a lot, his sphere of information and communication was a lot different than mine. I was never on the north side of the CNN Center unless I got a call from Ted or Bill Shaw. Beyond that, I never stepped foot in the North Tower. Nick spent a lot of time there because that's where his relationships were. That's where he came from. And as such, I think he had a different view of what was going on. And Nick was more of a corporate guy than I was. I wasn't. Nick was very, very corporate. And I think Nick started seeing opportunity for himself too, which I didn't mind that. I didn't have a problem with that on the surface, but it started to become problematic for me. And I think I talked to Nick about it once or twice, and after one or two conversations and not seeing any change, I just called the ball.
So, I mean, listen, I got to ask, what did he do that rubbed
It's
you
not so
wrong?
much what he did. It's look, when I brought Nick in, Nick Lambros, as a part of Turner Legal, I've explained this before, but in case anybody's a new listener, the way Turner was structured, I had complete control over all of the departments within WCW. Licensing, merchandising, live events, PR, whatever. Name one, I was responsible for it. The only two areas of the corporate structure that I was not in charge of was legal and finance. And that was done to protect Turner Broadcasting, right? It was a smart move. So whenever we had legal issues within Turner Broadcasting, I would work with whoever it was that was assigned to WCW from Turner Legal, but they didn't report to me. I couldn't give them direction, nor should I have been able. I'm not a lawyer, right? But they were independent of WCW. Well, WCW started to get so big that it became apparent we needed an in-house legal representative, not just someone that we could call once or twice a week if we had an issue. We need somebody that was there full time. So Nick left Turner Legal. He was still an attorney, but he left Turner Legal and came on to be a vice president of business affairs. But in essence, his job was exactly the same. But it would be easier for Nick to deal with legal issues and the representative over in Turner Legal. It would be a much more efficient way of handling things. So that's why Nick came in and took on that role. And I was excited. And he did a very good job in that role. He's really good at it. But I think Nick got to a point where he wanted more. And he wanted more when it came to, for example, marketing. The cat's ass logo was a Nick Lambros initiative. It just is. And hiring Jay Hassman, that was a Nick Lambros hire. Nick wanted to have control over areas within WCW other than business affairs, because let's face it, business affairs, while incredibly important and valuable, is a little mundane compared to some of the other parts of the business, like marketing and pay-per-view and other semi-creative positions. So Nick wanted more, and we talked about it and worked that out. But I think it got to the point where Nick forgot about what he was really there to do and was far more interested in pursuing the areas of the business that he wasn't there to do. It's one of the reasons why, and it's my fault. I did it, not fading the heat to anybody else, but I remember talking to Harvey about this, and Harvey saying to me, and I, it was good advice. Harvey said, Eric, you're controlling too much. You've got to learn to delegate. You've got to learn to let other people succeed and fail along the way, because you can't do everything yourself. And I was, this period of time, I was rocking pretty hard. And I thought, okay, because that was a flaw as a manager. Harvey made it clear that he thought, while I was doing a lot of things right, obviously, 98, I think, was the most financially successful year in WCW's history. We were still rocking and everything was going just dandy in 1998, right? Even in August of 98. But Harvey made it clear to me that one of the flaws in my game as a manager was just controlling everything. Okay, Harvey, I'm going to work on that, because I wanted to be better. I wanted to improve. I wasn't stubborn about it. So I started letting other people make decisions. And the Cat's Ass logo was one of them. I remember looking at this, Nick was so excited. And I brought Jay Hassman in, and he had these different designs and logos created, and he presented them. This is a guy who up until that point just made sure that I's were dotted, T's were crossed, legal contracts were structured properly. And now he gets to play in the more creative side of things. And again, I'm not criticizing for it, because it's human nature. You want to learn something new, do something different.
Yeah.
But I remember going, this fucking sucks. This is horrible. But I didn't want to be that guy that said, no, I don't like it. I'm not going to let you do it. I felt like it was better in the long run to let go. And that's an example of, that was, first of all, we didn't need to change the fucking logo to anything. No. The logo was great. And there was no real need to change it. The show was doing great. I mean, when people saw that logo, they heard that music, they knew exactly what was coming down the tracks, and they were excited for it. So why change it just for the sake of changing it? And then to change that logo and a lot of the graphics and everything else, to go through the expense and the time and the effort to do that for no reason was a mistake right out of the chute. And then to end up with what we ended up with was another one. And that was kind of the beginning of the end as far as my relationship with Nick, and working relationship. Still friends. I saw him a couple of years ago. I went to Atlanta and looked him up, and we went out and had lunch and all that. But the working part of it, it started to deteriorate when Nick decided he wanted to be something other than business affairs.
Well, we just got the Nick Lambro saga. That's really the first time we've talked about that. How did he take it when you helped him find a new gig?
I think his feelings were hurt more than anything. Yeah. Because he didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't like he made a decision that was horrible and cost the company a lot of money or anything like that. It was just, he wasn't what I needed at that time. He wasn't the counterbalance that I needed. I didn't need somebody to improve marketing. It wasn't really broken. But again, I think Nick was just at this crossroads where he was really bored doing the things that he had been doing and wanted to do something else, and probably pushed a little too hard, too often. And when it happened, I think his feelings were hurt. There's no question about it. In fact, we talked about it a couple of years ago when I took him out to lunch when I was in Atlanta. But I think he also understood.
Well, we're excited to learn more about the behind the scenes moving and shaking of WCW in 1998. They're taking a break right now, though, on Nitro. We will too. And we're going to take a break now to tell you about a product that, well, Eric and I use very, very proudly. It's Henson Razors. I just absolutely love the story of this company. You know, these guys didn't even start making razors. That wasn't the original plan. You see, this is a family-owned business. It's actually an aerospace parts manufacturer. These cats have made parts for the International Space Station and the Mars rover, and now they're bringing that same precision engineering to your doggone face. You see, what they're doing is they're using their aerospace-grade CNC machines to make the thinnest razors you've ever seen. And I know what you're saying to yourself. You're saying to yourself, Self, how thin are these razors? Well, they're 0.0013 inches. That is thinner than a human hair. And what that means is a smoother shave. It means there's less wobble. It means there's less vibration. It means you'll have less nicks and cuts and scrapes. You're going to have the best shave of your life. If you're watching along with us, you see that this is an old school razor. It's like your one your handsome ass grandfather used. It's an old school traditional double-sided razor, one that everyone in wrestling is very, very familiar with. Except Pop never had a razor this thin. But this razor from Henson actually has built-in channels to evacuate hair and cream. It makes clogging virtually impossible. I think they've nailed it, Eric. I think they've made the world's most perfect razor. And that's what I admire most, is they didn't go into this as quote-unquote businessmen looking to make the best razor business. If you're only looking for profits, you're going to make sure that these razors are very expensive. These are very affordable. You're also going to make sure that there's some planned obsolescence. If you've had an old iPhone and get a new one and now magically you got to have a new charger, you know what I'm talking about. The razor companies, they do this all the time, and they make a bunch of plastic junk. This is not. This is the last razor you'll ever need. And oh, by the way, not only do they not do any of those gimmicks, they don't even do a subscription gimmick. You don't need any of that. You need this one razor that will last you the rest of your life. And it's rare that you find something that's better and also more affordable. We're all sort of accustomed and understand, hey, if you want something better, it's going to cost more. Not only is this the best shave you've ever had, it's also much more affordable than if you went down to the drugstore. Down there, man, they're keeping their razors under lock and key. Not here. When you get ready to replace your blades with a Henson razor, it's only $3 to $5. Not $3 to $5 a quarter, $3 to $5 a year. But right now, we're going to get you 2 years worth of blades free. Here's how. It's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that will last you a lifetime. Visit .com/83weeks. Pick the razor for you and use our code 83weeks, and we'll get you 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just be sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you go to HENSONSHAVING.com/83weeks and use the code 83weeks. That's HensonShaving.com/83weeks. And let's get back to Nitro here in 3, 2, 1, play. So we just talked over a Kevin Nash promo, and Meltzer would be pretty critical about it in The Observer. He says, did you ever see the movie Groundhog Day? It's like I wake up every morning and keep hearing the exact same interview. The cities change every week, but the interview stays the same. Anyway, Nash said the Wolfpack drew straws to decide who would be in the War Games, which is a very nice way to protect Conan from being portrayed as the weak link of the team. He then challenged Piper and brought up that they had a problem outside of the ring once and told the story in regards to Hellwig about a guy who fell asleep for years and then woke up and he was surrounded by wolves, one of which he thought he knew, and that one bit his hand and the others had a feeding frenzy with him. Actually, this was a pretty good interview. So whereas Meltzer starts to be critical because that's just the way he's writing The Observer, he doesn't end around and says, it was actually pretty decent.
The guy is he's a fucking lunatic.
It's an interesting way to build this pay-per-view, though. Historically, when you think about War Games, you think about, back, or at least I do, I think about the old Horsemen days. So all the good guys on one side, all the bad guys on the other side. Now here, though, it feels like, all right, we're going to have a Piper team and a WCW team and a red and black NWO team and a white and black NWO team, like multiple teams, but smaller teams in a cage. Were we overcomplicating this? Were we doing a War Game for the sake of doing it? What do you think?
I'll say I got vertigo just listening to you recap it. It's just, wow, it's a lot to track. It's a lot to get invested in. It's just, it's too much. Way overly complicated.
Well, we see Tony Schiavone in the ring right now, dressed like a cruise director. He's going to be your entertainment czar for the week here on Carnival. He's with JJ Dillon, who'd like to have a word with you about your term life insurance. And then he's here with Arn Anderson, who looks like he's here for a Promise Keepers men's convention.
Listen to you. He's wearing a polo shirt, for crying out loud. He was just pretty fancy there for Arn.
No, I'm saying he's a sharp dressed man. I'm for it. I wanted to ask you about a little controversy that was brewing on the independents, if we could even call ECW an independent by 1998. I guess once upon a time, Taz ran the ECW school, the dojo, if you will, and he was sort of co-training there with Perry Saturn. As we all recall, in 1997, Perry Saturn switches jerseys. He joins WCW. And I guess Perry started to portray himself on camera. Look at this old school Arn Anderson promo. This is the promo
great?
that they're showing on TV that got him hired by Dusty Rhodes and Jim Crockett Promotions. We'll talk about Saturn in a moment. Let's track this Arn promo, what's left of it.
And send them packing, Daddy. Some of them's working at Hank's hot dog stand. Some's working at 7-Eleven, but none of them are wrestling. Well, just because you think that's all over, brother, that was the calm before the storm, because the best, the youngest, the best looking Anderson is on his way. You understand what I'm saying? Now, you got several timid fellas running around there blowing their own horn. You got Dusty Rose, the American Dream, apple pie, mom, hot dogs. Well, brother, your mama must have fed you a lot of apple pie and hot dogs. You got Ricky Steamboat. Looks like you ought to be on a Hawaiian Punch commercial. You got some Magnum TA. What's he going to pull up in a red sports car, all smiles with pretty teeth? Brother, this is not a toothpaste commercial. This is professional wrestling. And what I do very best, better than anything, is wrestle. Wrestling machine. So just remember one thing, boys. I'm heading your way. Mid-Atlantic Sports has piled enough money, and they're going to throw it all back together. So just one thing, just one brief thing for you to do, boys. Delta has 5 non-stops daily, 250 pounds of culture bulks heading your way. You guess which plane I'm going to be in. You guess when I'm going to show up, but I'm coming real soon. See you, boys.
Boy, does that bring back some memories. Wow.
Where'd you find that?
That tape is well over, I don't know, it didn't have a date on it, but I know it was well over 15 years old. And I was fortunate 15 some years ago to have my opinion be very highly respected in the profession when it came to evaluating young wrestlers. And I saw something there. Before he was the enforcer, he was rough around the edges, he was untested, but there was definitely something there. And I went to bat for him, and he became one of the original Horsemen, and he was there through the glory years, and he's still the heart and soul of the Horsemen. But you know, there's something of even greater significance as we look at that tape, because when I think of the Horsemen and WCW, they're kind of synonymous with each other. And as long as the Horsemen were riding, WCW was going to be okay. But 2 years ago, I saw the black and white break away, a fragment. I saw the red and black break away, another fragment. And I started to worry just what was going to happen to WCW. And then over the last couple months, I really started to worry because I wasn't sure anymore if the Horsemen were ever going to ride again. And I saw a Steve Mongo McMichael. I saw Crippler Chris Benoit, park their egos, take risks, come up to you just like you did to me 15 years ago. And they weren't coming to ask you to put on the tights and wrestle again, because that's no longer an option. They were coming to you just like you came to me 15 years ago for some direction, for some advice. And what troubled me was I heard you say to them, hey, you guys just don't get it. Well, Arn, I think it's you that doesn't get it. Yeah. Now I know there's a couple guys here tonight, and they're making their way down to the ring.
So if you're not watching along with us, Chris Benoit and Steve McMichael have now joined.
Arn, I know these guys got some things
here
to say to you one more time, and I hope you'll listen to them like you've never listened to them before, and maybe look at what they have to say from a different perspective.
Just give us a minute, Tony. Just give us a minute. Okay.
So we can cut the audio. The idea is we're building up the return of Ric Flair to WCW here. We're still just a few weeks away from that happening. It's going to become a magical moment for TV. We've talked about it in the archives, but I mean, at this point, are you just happy to have the whole Ric Flair, Eric Bischoff, WCW saga at least tabled for now? I mean, this has to be a bit of a relief to this. This is one less thing to worry about, right?
Yeah, it wasn't so much I was worried about anything. It was just a really, really uncomfortable situation. You know, I had always thought of Rick as a friend up until this point, and yes, we had issues, and just like anybody else that works together would have from time to time. But this got so personal, and it weighed very heavily on me. And I was just glad to get it done and move on. But before we talk about anything else, I want to go. JJ Dillon was really freaking good at what he did. He really told a great story there that felt so believable and real, because some of it was, but he was able to tell that story and got business done, check the business box, but it didn't feel like business. It felt personal and intimate and real. And that's talent, by the way. Anybody can not anybody, unfortunately, a lot of people can't, but memorizing a script is one thing. But being able to go out there and deliver it in a way that it doesn't feel like you've memorized a script, that's the art. JJ really did a great job with that. He kind of bounced around a little bit to the end and got a little, I think, distracted. But 85% of that promo was probably one of the better ones that you'll see, you know, watching wrestling, because it was believable and real, and Arn's reaction to it. And it was easy for Arn. You know, if you look at that reaction when JJ said to Arn, you know, whatever the words were, I think you're wrong, you know, and it caught Arn by surprise, because up until that moment in that promo, JJ was putting him on a pedestal.
Yes.
It was like his it was like his Hall of Fame speech, right? And then JJ shifted gears. And when he did, if you saw the tight shot there that Craig Leathers got of Arn, it was like, what the fuck, JJ? And it was so subtle. That's the thing, you know, because we're so used to seeing everything big and over the top and loud and overacted for the most part. But in that moment, that was a very tight shot, and you got Arn's eyes, and Arn's reaction was so believable that you forgot you were watching professional wrestling. It was so good. I'm really glad I saw that. It was really, really good.
So before we take a listen to the Arn Anderson promo, the fabulous promo that got him hired from Jim Crockett Promotions all those years ago, we were talking a little bit about Perry Saturn and Taz, and that Perry Saturn started to maybe borrow from his old friend Taz in ECW, and Taz was not too happy about that. The segment that we saw in a backstage skit earlier, where Mike Tenay was talking to Lodi and Saturn, I guess the idea was that Saturn has to act as Lodi's manslave, if you will, until the middle of September. He looks in the camera and says, "Pain is temporary and pride is forever," something that I guess Taz had used on ECW television before. Was Taz ever on your radar for WCW? I mean, we know of ultimately he's going to be the top guy in ECW and then makes his way over to the WWF. But when we saw Sandman and we saw Raven and we saw so many others, Stevie Richards and Saturn and Whipwreck and on, was Taz ever in serious consideration for a WCW deal, do you think?
No, not by me. Now, again, there was nobody in ECW that was on my radar because I didn't watch it and I wasn't following it. So when I say there was nobody on my radar, no disrespect to them, but I really didn't watch the product. So no, not for me. Now, did Terry Taylor have a thought about Taz? Did Kevin Sullivan? Because Kevin and Terry, I think, were far more familiar and followed the product and had friends there and relationships there. So they very well could have had thoughts or plans for Taz that just never made it to my desk.
We should talk about some other folks behind the scenes. You mentioned Terry Taylor. I can't believe this is real, but it makes the Observer. Terry Taylor was told to stay home on August 31st. That's the show we're watching from Miami, due to heat between he and television producer Annette Yoder from a week prior. Taylor and Kevin Sullivan had basically been taking time off from having any real input on either Monday or Thursday and are now just putting together the Saturday night show. Bischoff is booking Monday and Thursday, largely on the advice of Hogan and Nash. We've talked a little bit about creative. We can table that for now. But the issue with Annette Yoder and Terry Taylor, any context or details you recall about that?
No. And if I did, I wouldn't repeat it. Look, we've all, no, no, I don't. And I'm not saying no because I don't want to talk about it, but even if I did, I wouldn't. But I really don't remember what the issue was.
I mean, you said even if you knew, you wouldn't repeat it. That implies it was a personal issue, not a work issue. Is that fair?
Oh, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, because Annette and Terry Annette didn't report to Terry or vice versa. So it would have been a chemistry issue. And I have a vague recollection, but it was not, it was more chemistry probably than anything else, in a personal issue. But I honestly don't. If I remembered the details, I would say, Conrad, I remember, but I'm not going to speak to it. But I honestly don't remember. I just know that it was chemistry.
Copy. We should talk about Vampiro too. There was rumor and innuendo that he was supposed to debut here in Miami on August 31st, but I guess his costume wasn't done yet. At the time, a lot of his costuming was done by the same person who made the costumes for Marilyn Manson, and you guys wanted him to have a cool, debut and first impression. So it gets tabled, and it's said that it'll push back 2 weeks. But that 2 weeks, September 14th, well, that'll be the night that Ric Flair returns. And I'm sure that's probably something people are worried, like, hey, is that going to get lost in the shuffle? Had you seen any of Vampiro's stuff before WCW, or was he not somebody on your radar?
Well, no, he wasn't on my radar. I didn't bring him in. I didn't scout him. That would have come probably from Kevin Sullivan, more than likely. But once Kevin brought him to me, of course, I saw tape. I saw 8x10s, to get an idea, where he would fit. That would have been a Kevin Sullivan hire.
He winds up not actually debuting until March of '99. I mean, here we are in late August. So I guess that cat just got to hang around and collect some checks in the meantime. But it was a long-term investment. Who are we to say that wasn't the right call?
Even though you just did, but yeah, okay. Way to cover.
Well, I mean, listen, I don't know exactly what all was going on. I mean, you've indicated behind the scenes there were a lot of things going on. I don't know what Vampiro's contract was, but it probably wasn't, tippy top guy money. But to just have a guy just sitting around for 6 or 7 months collecting a check.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of that going around even today, don't we? I think with regard to Vampiro, this is a guess now, but Vampiro still had obligations in Mexico, and he very well may have been one of the talents that I allowed to work in Mexico, provided it didn't create a scheduling conflict with WCW. So there may have been some of that. He may have been wrapping up some of his previous commitments and things like that. And without sounding like a jackass, it wasn't like Vampiro was, we're going to bring him to the company and put him on the top and build an entire program around him. He was going to be an addition to the roster.
Yes.
Not a major player. So it is what it is. Was what it was.
We're watching Eddie Guerrero here. He is wrestling Brian Adams. And if you've noticed, anytime we see a member of the NWO Black and White in the ring, we see the Ultimate Warrior hanging out in the rafters. Yeah, not Sting in 1996 or 97, but his old tag team partner, Warrior, in 1998, doing his best Sting impression. This is, I don't know. It doesn't.
Let me save you the trouble. It's fucking stupid.
Well, there you go.
Horrible. It's horrible. Beat myself with a board for that. God dang it, that's embarrassing. It really is embarrassing. Sitting here, I forgot all about it. I love doing these shows because I do these shows and I go back and I see things that I didn't even see it when it was happening half the time because I'm running around backstage or doing what I'm doing. You know, I saw the show on paper before we did it. Once it's done, I went home. I may have watched a replay if we got to the hotel bar quick enough. More often than not, we did. Sometimes we didn't, but if we did, that would have been the only time I would have seen it. So when I see these shows, when we go back and we do these watch-alongs, I get really excited because some of this stuff I'm seeing for the very first time. And then sometimes I see things that I wish I would never see.
I'm excited for us to talk about the Eddie Guerrero promo that we're going to get in just a moment.
What are we doing here? What's going on, Eddie?
How about that for a little storyline? Eddie Guerrero is going to do an interview where he said he was going to wrestle because he didn't want to get sued by Bischoff in reference to the Flair deal. He then did a match with Brian Adams where he laid on the ground and covered up and basically did nothing and began the systematic destruction of the TV show after he got pinned in 2 minutes and 23 seconds. The live crowd hated this, but it got worse. So listen, we're maybe a little too inside baseball here, maybe a little too cute, no?
Yes, without question.
Let's track it.
You may have the power, but I'm not going to give you the opportunity to sue me like you have other people in this company. All right, fans, we'll be back. Stay with us.
So we're cutting his mic too. We're leaning way heavy into story. They're going to take a break. We will too. And man, we're going to talk about something that I'm pretty excited about, Eric. And I'm sure you are too. Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the most fun I've had winning up to 25x my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players. You pick more or less on their projected stats and you place your entry. Get to test your skills against Prize Picks this football season, and it's the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you got the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 in just a few taps. It really is simple to play. You make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. You get quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. That's what Prize Picks is all about, and that's the reason Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. This week on Prize Picks, you can pick things like Barkley for more than 60 yards and Patrick Mahomes for more than 2 passing touchdowns, or maybe Aaron Rodgers for more than 3 passing touchdowns and Travis Kelce for more than 50 yards. You've got all these different options that you can throw down, even like Odell Beckham Jr. for more than 50 yards and Josh Allen for more than 2 passing touchdowns. Prize Picks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts, like my favorite, Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts players' projections up to 25%. That provides you even more value. And now Prize Picks even has Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. And guys, if you've just been watching football without Prize Picks, you're missing out. It's so much fun. This has been something that I have to admit I was a little late to the party on, but I had fun with it last week. I'm ready for it this week. You're going to love it. And it provides a trash talk opportunity around the office. You know I love that. Go right now to prizepicks.com/83weeks and use the code 83weeks for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/83weeks and use the code 83weeks for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Eric, how fun is this, man? I mean, we get to watch football. We get to have some skin in the game. We get to have steaks. That's Eric Bischoff all day, is it not?
It is. And, you know, one of the things that I've started doing over the last couple of years, I love listening to sports talk on the radio. You know, Sean Pendergast, for example, is someone that I love listening to. And most just about everybody, Sean was formerly with CBS Sports Radio. But a lot of the CBS Sports Radio content, like on Saturdays, but particularly on Sundays, I really, really enjoy. And being that I'm not really, an avid sports fan in general, but NFL fan for sure, I consider myself a peripheral fan. I'll watch it occasionally if the weather's bad outside and I've got nothing else to do. I'll watch it. But over the last couple of years, as I listen to radio more, sports radio, and because I appreciate the art of good radio, it's becoming a lost art. And when you find somebody really good, like Sean Pendergast is, for example, the reason I like Sean so much is because he tells a story. It's not just stats and opinion; it's a story. And he's so good at it. He's made me, and others have made me interested in sports that I wouldn't otherwise have an interest in. And now I can take that interest and have a little fun with it and go into placing some of these bets. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but some of the people that I really enjoy listening to and learn from do. And it kind of ups my level of enjoyment in the game itself.
Check it out. It's Prize Picks. You're going to love it. Let's get back to Nitro here. We're August 31st, 1998. What a crazy show this is. In 3, 2, 1, play. So we got Ernest Miller, who's going to be wrestling Scotty Rigg here. We should also mention that at the start of the show, that promo, which had you and Hulk in the ring together, you're talking about Stevie Ray being the third man on the team. We haven't really done a ton with Stevie Ray at this point in WCW. I mean, he's most famous for being one half of Harlem Heat, but we know Booker T has gone on to enjoy great singles success. And for whatever reason, it feels like Stevie's sort of on the outside looking in. So having this association and being name dropped by Hulk Hogan in the opening segment of the show, that's a big opportunity for Stevie, but one that a lot of fans online were critical of at the time. Why did you and Hogan have so much confidence in Stevie Ray here in 1998?
Stevie was a great performer in the ring, and he was intimidating as hell to look at, believable, incredible. The flaw in his game was his promo ability. One of the reasons that Booker was always out in front of that team and on the mic, and one of the reasons that Booker T became so successful, after he hung up his boots, so to speak, is because he's so good on the mic. And Stevie didn't have that talent. So within the NWO, that was easily camouflaged. So you have all the assets that Stevie brought to the table without having to worry about whether or not he could carry a promo. It was a great fit.
It's a fun time in WCW because it feels like, we're no longer in 1997 where it feels like we're building towards this one story of Sting and the NWO. But man, we've got so much other stuff going on. I mean, we've got 2 different factions of the NWO and we've got Goldberg, but it also creates opportunities for new characters like Ernest Miller, who I think fans, I know he's trying to be a heel here, but I just found that so hard. Like there was so much natural charisma with Ernest. It's really difficult to get me to want to boo him. I mean, I just think that guy reading a phone book would be entertaining.
And that was bad booking. That was bad creative on our part. And Ernest, I talked to Ernest into coming to WCW. It was a tough sell. It took me 2 or 3 sushi dinners to get him convinced that to give WCW a try. Ernest was deep into his martial arts career. He was a highly rated kickboxer and loved it. He had his own karate school. He was very successful. And wrestling was not something that was high on his list of things to do or explore. But the mistake I made in convincing him was coming in as a heel, because you're absolutely right. And I knew he had charisma because I was friends with Ernest long before he came into WCW. He was my son's martial arts instructor. And I ended up training with Ernest and a couple of his other black belts on the weekends and had a great relationship with him. But as much as I recognized that he had all the potential and had a big personality, I didn't realize how great of a babyface he could have been, and cast him as a heel. And it was just the wrong thing to do.
We see Ernest wrestling Scotty Riggs here. They're going to go 2.5 minutes. Next up, we've got Conan in his hometown, Miami, Florida. He'll be taking on Marty Jannetty, who has enjoyed a resurgence here, at least in the online conversation. But Marty Jannetty is a guy that a lot of people forget was even in WCW. I mean, this is the guy who felt like he had 14 different stops and starts with Vince McMahon in the WWF. How do you think Marty wound up on your radar?
One of the very first live events that I ever promoted back in, I think it was September of 87, maybe in the spring of 88. But Vern let me, I got TV clearance in a town because that was part of my job, right? Syndication. So I went down to Mason City, Iowa, KIMT television, actually. I went down to Mason City, Iowa. It was a CBS affiliate, I think. Went down there, had a meeting with the program director. He was a older guy. He was probably looking at retirement on his calendar anytime. Went down there, and he was an old Vern Gagne guy. Anyway, I was able to get the show on the air. And about 2 or 3 months after I got the show on the air, I went to Vern and said, can I promote this? I'd never promoted a town before. The only promotion I ever did was for Vern. I promoted a touch football game between former Minnesota Vikings and a lot of the guys from the AWA, professional wrestlers. We had David Casper come in from the Oakland Raiders. He had a bunch of ex-baseball players, ex-football players, and wrestlers. We put on this touch football game that drew like 14,000 people at the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome. So I was pretty proud of that. Got a sponsor. G. Heilman Brewing Company was a sponsor to the event. I think they spent like $100,000 on it. So it was the first time Vern had ever seen a sponsorship that actually had a cash value to it. So I think Vern had a little bit of confidence in me, and he let me promote Mason City, Iowa, all by myself. And on that card were the Midnight Rockers, Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels. The main event was Manny Fernandez and Wahoo McDaniel. And it was a bloodbath. It was a bloodbath. But so I knew of Marty Jannetty back from my time when he was in the AWA, and so was I. How he ended up here, though, like I forgot all about that. I don't know why or how I would have let that happen, but clearly I did.
I don't know why, but that might be the quote of the day. I don't know how or why I let that happen. I feel like
honest here, not sugarcoating my own shit.
That's probably been said more than once in regards to Marty Jannetty. Did you have a chance to see his episode of Dark Side of the Ring?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
It was wild. I'll tell you that. Let me just say that. So they're actually going to get a decent little match here with him and Marty Jannetty, Conan and Marty Jannetty. They go 9 minutes and 7 seconds. And it's written in the Observer that Jannetty got his first haircut in 18 years and looks like a new person. And he says the problem is nobody recognized who this new person was. And the fans who were really into Conan were not enjoying this aging gigolo David Cassidy at 40 looking pretty boy whipping on their guy in the match. And it felt like it lasted 6 weeks because Conan does wind up giving Marty a lot of offense. But man, it's weird how a haircut changes the way people feel about a character. I know that, Rick was pretty critical back in the early 90s of being asked to cut his hair and felt like he could walk through the Charlotte airport and not be bothered because no one recognized him without the trademark mane. I guess Marty Jannetty, sort of the same thing here with the fans. They're used to seeing that long mane, and now it's a different look. Do you think, I know that like tattoos, I guess, really matter for things like action figures and things like that. Does a hairstyle really affect a wrestler's marketability, do you think?
It can, certainly. I think if you could imagine, what if Bill Goldberg would have come out wearing a wig 3 weeks after we first saw him? His part of his brand, his trademark was his look. And a big part of your look is your hair. Sting's, Surfer Sting's flat top platinum hairdo. It's a big part of his trademark. When Sting started growing his hair out because he got tired of dyeing it and bleaching it, it certainly affected, the way people felt about Sting. They weren't sure how they felt about it, but it was very, very noticeable. Can you imagine Hulk Hogan coming out without the blonde hair coming, out from underneath the headband? I mean, you can point to a million different examples, but I think in the case of Marty Jannetty, at this time, it's like people probably had not seen him in a long time. And then to see him not looking like you remember him probably was just hard for people to connect to him.
I want to ask you about the rating for this show, but we'll do that a little later. As a reminder, this is the highest rated Nitro of all time because it's preempted. And that led to a pretty good question from Justin Hone. On those instances where you're running unopposed, how far out was it on everyone's radar that was happening? And how much time did you put into doing anything different or special for those nights?
That's a really good question. From what I recall, we would probably know a couple months in advance, because network schedules were not top secret.
Right.
Especially for big events like the US Open or the Dog Show, because they start advertising and promoting. So you knew at least, I would say probably 6, 8, maybe 12 weeks in advance. So we had time to plan. We didn't really change the way we would do TV. Format was the format. We might load it up for sure, recognizing that we have the stage to ourselves, and maybe put a little bit more gas on it than we might otherwise put on it in terms of the talent that we had on the show or whatever the stories were that we're playing out on the show. But it didn't really require a lot of reconstructive surgery just because of the opportunity. Good question, though.
Great question. I want to encourage everybody to go watch this because it's kind of surreal to see Marty Jannetty wrestling without the long hair.
But look at him go. I will. I mean, he's bumping. I mean, he's selling great. I mean, there's, we know Marty, and Marty's got history, and not all of it's really very good. But when he was on, he was really, really talented.
Interesting question from On This Day in WWE. Of course, we've talked about the Ultimate Warrior's debut before and just how long and rambling that promo was and what you felt like being in the ring and hearing all that. We've got that episode up on the archives right now at 83 weeks on youtube.com. But a great question from On This Day in WWE. Did Warrior actually own a pair of moccasins as Hogan claimed? And after the disaster of their first confrontation, what measures did Eric put in place to stop a repeat? I do think that's worth discussing, not the moccasins, but you had that long rambling promo in the debut, and now we've tried a lot of other stuff. So we saw the big pyro entrance and the smoke filled ring, and he disappeared, and then later he's in the ceiling. We're definitely going with less is more. We're not going to show a really long match. We're not going to give him an opportunity to have a 17-minute promo. So we're trying to work around it. That had to be a conscious effort. Who else would have helped you in trying to do that? And then how are you positioning it to Warrior so it doesn't feel like something he's going to take personally?
I wasn't too worried about it if he took it personally or not. It was just an obvious issue. And it's funny, I chuckled when you said, obviously you're, thinking about less is more, because right before you actually said it, I was going, man, this guy defines less is more. and it became really apparent to me while I was standing in the ring after 6 or 8 minutes of listening to that 26-minute promo or whatever the fuck it ended up being. There's just no way I'll ever put a microphone in this guy's hand again that I can't edit, not live. Anything that he does when it comes to speaking, I'm going to do my best to make sure that it's something we do backstage or can edit or otherwise fix. I was not going to give him a live mic. And I don't know that I felt the need to explain to him why, or I may have, I don't know, but I wasn't concerned one way or the other because there was no way I was going to repeat that again.
Great question, though. Andy wants to know, during this time, there never seemed to be a direct path for Brett. Did you want Brett to ultimately be a face or a heel? That's an interesting question. Like, did you have a preference? I mean, we know that he, coming off of the hottest heel run he had ever had with the WWF, he comes into WCW what feels like a natural baby face. but man, he really was hitting on all cylinders as a heel. What would if you had it to do over again, or maybe even back then, did you think, man, we got to get this guy over as a blank?
No, I saw him as a baby face. That was the initial plan, the discussions I had with Brett. Just because of what happened in Montreal, I think he was a sympathetic figure amongst the wrestling fans. I think everybody felt like he was done wrong, and it was just much easier for him to come in as a baby face. And that's how I saw him. In all the conversations I had with Brett about what we could do and where we might go, him as a baby face was it. Not that, it wouldn't have evolved into a heel turn somewhere down the road, but those were not the initial discussions.
Ed wants to bust your balls a little bit, and he says, great, you analyzed the show. Now, how many of those matches progressed the story? If it's a lot, AEW can learn. If it's not a lot, Eric Bischoff can stop being so critical. This is when Eric says the merger took his eye off the ball. So is this a good snapshot of his eye on the ball? Well, listen, you've been pretty critical about AEW. And you've also been very honest about taking your lumps when we go back and watch a show like this. I mean, before I even get a chance to be critical, you cut me off and say, oh, that sucked. But it is a function of, man, we got to do this 52 times a year, not just on Nitro, but on Thunder. It's 5 hours of content a week. It's easy for anybody to get burnt out at this pace, but this is the highest revenue year. This is the highest rated show. It's really hard to be super critical of WCW for the overall course of, or on this particular night, a 6.0 rating. I mean, just a crazy number. When you look back at this, are there lessons that could be, gleaned for someone in the modern era watching a show like this, or no?
To answer this question, one would have to go back and look at the episodes leading up to it and look at the episodes that follow it in order to be able to tell you how many of these matches were advancing storylines, wouldn't it? I mean, it's like looking at a page of a book and say, okay, you wrote this book. You wrote it 25 years ago. Does everything on this page advance the story? Well, I don't know. Let me go back and look at the story and see where it ties together. So it's, a smart ass question from a smart ass listener. And I appreciate smart ass listeners, but it's kind of a stupid question in a way, without looking at what was going on in context, without listening to the commentary. Listening to the commentary would probably tell me a lot about whether or not there were stories being tied together or not. So maybe the person who asked the question should go back and look at Peacock and look at 2 or 3 episodes prior to this and 2 or 3 episodes after this. And then perhaps you could answer your own smart ass question. and then come back to me and tell me what you found. If you can be honest about it, which I doubt you can, because usually smart ass questions come from non-serious people. Thanks for the question and the opportunity to make you look like an idiot.
Oh, goodness gracious. Listen.
Come on, man. Heel Me still lives.
I love it.
If you poke it, you're going to get it. It's still there. That instinct is still there. I try to suppress it. I really, really do. But occasionally it reveals itself.
Well, let's talk about, listen, Shivani would often say in this era, oh, it's the greatest night in the history of our great sport. And
Still does. Still does.
Meltzer would write, it was expected that going unopposed during the period where pro wrestling interest is so high that WCW would set record ratings on August 31st with Raw preempted due to the U.S. Open. And even putting on an atrocious television, which saw unopposed the audience drop during the third hour, it wasn't enough to prevent it from creating all-time records and those records being smashed. Nitro set an all-time record rating with a 6.03. That's a 5.08 first hour, a 6.62 second hour, and a 6.39 third hour. That's a 9.27 share and an average of 4,485,333 homes per minute. The NBA playoffs was involved in the prior record, And that was when you guys had a 5.69 rating and an 8.18 share for 4.18 million homes over on Raw. That was for Steve Austin versus Goldust. So when you guys are preempted back in April, after the Austin era has begun on the heels of WrestleMania 14, 5.69 was the record at the time. You guys crush it. 6.03. Huge number. And the idea that it got a 9.27 share is maybe what's most interesting to me, because these days when we talk about ratings, more often than not, people talk about the number of people. In this era, we're talking about the number of homes, 4,485,000 homes and a 9.27, which is just crazy. To put that in perspective,
it's a viewing, so people can understand that. How many homes was it in?
4.4.
4.4 million times 1.5, because I think 1.5 is what Nielsen, that was their calculation on average of how many people are in the household watching the TV while it's on. So you've got what, about 6-7 million people watching this show? So yeah, I think the stories were probably holding together and threading pretty well. Going back to the previous question. And the other thing I want to point out, because I have to sit and listen to this bullshit, is Dave Meltzer, even though the third hour, lost audience. Are you fucking kidding me? 3 hours of live wrestling, and yeah, at 11 o'clock at night, people start fading away, and because they got to get up and go to work in the morning. How many 3-hour shows do we know where the third hour actually increases? I think it probably happens, but it's very fucking rare. But someone in television would know that. Somebody that writes about television, has never produced it, wouldn't. Just wanted to make that clear. Now you're getting me fired up with this fucking Dave Meltzer shit.
The previous all-time record for TNT was on March 16th. And when we're saying all-time, guys, we mean earlier this same year. It was a spring breakout Nitro. It was unopposed due to Moby Dick, and it drew a 5.58 rating and an 8.48 share. That was with Sting and Luger teaming up to take on Hogan and Savage. And, I mean, this is just monster numbers. I mean, even think about this. Lodi and Saturn teaming up against High Voltage becomes the second most watched pro wrestling match of all time. I want to repeat that. High Voltage, yeah, the WCW Saturday Night team, Rage and Chaos, they teamed up against Lodi and Saturn, and more than 5,035,000 homes watched it. That popped a 6.77 rating. Now, the most watched all-time match at the time was Hogan and Goldberg for the title at the Georgia Dome. Number 2, though, High Voltage, Lodi and Saturn. It's remarkable. The promo, though, that actually popped the biggest rating on the whole day is DDP and Dennis or Roddy Piper, not Dennis Rodman, but Diamond Dallas Page and Roddy Piper do a promo that does a 6.83 rating. It's in 5,082,000 homes. And then the main event, Hogan and Brett taking on, that gets a 6.21 rating. So it's pretty good, but not quite as high as that High Voltage rating. Dude,
isn't it ironic though? You're talking about all these records and the 8-10 million people watching Nitro, yeah. And this was after Starrcade '97 when everybody thought, including Dave Meltzer and all his fucking minions, that that's what killed WCW. Did it really? Considering in 1998 we had one of the most profitable years we've ever had, and broke almost every record that existed in terms of television ratings. So it's kind of weird, isn't it?
One of the things,
two facts, and you just kind of scratch your head.
We got a fun promo in the ring right now with Canyon and Saturn. Saturn's dressing like a goof. It's fun. I wanted to ask you about the preemption, because you and Bruce Pritchard have talked about privately a lot, and we've sort of alluded to it a little bit here, that when we're taking a look at the wrestling audience at large, so not just a Nitro audience, not just a Raw audience, but both of them combined, most people would say, okay, well, you just take a look at how many people were watching Nitro, and then you add it to the list of how many people were watching Raw. But what you and Bruce have pointed out is that's not really factoring in people who are switching and watching both. So when people just come out and say things like, well, 10 million people were watching Monday Night Raw or wrestling on Monday nights, maybe that's not exactly true, because you're getting some folks who are switching channels and they're getting counted twice. Meltzer points something out here that I found fascinating, and I wanted to bring it up to you. The general rule has been that one pro wrestling show gets preempted. The remaining show usually draws about 62% of the total pro wrestling audience from the previous week, which in this case would be a 6.03 rating, or exactly what the show did. I find that interesting that he's got it dialed in that if there is a preemption, either on Raw or Nitro, the show that remains will get 62% of the total rating from the week before. Interesting to me that 62% are going to stick around. And I think there's probably some parallels we could bring to what you and Bruce have often said, is that there is crossover there, and 62% seems to hit the nail on the head. What say you?
It did on this, perhaps on this particular show. But look, there's no doubt that there's duplication, and there was duplicate. They referred to it as duplication back then. But to your point, you have a wrestling audience that is 10 pounds, and they go back and forth between the two shows. And when one of those shows is no longer there, you don't have that back and forth. So you're going to see an increase, but it is certainly not double. And I think, the amount of increase in viewership when one show is preempted that the other receive, I'm sure it varies on the time of year, what else is going on, what else is going on in television, what happens to be going on leading into whatever the next pay-per-view is, how hot are the stories, all those are variable. So I don't think it's consistent across the board, but certainly we've always known that there's duplication there. You can see it when you watch you sit down and you look at the minute by minutes for each show, which I've done in the past. You can literally see it happen right in front of you. How you calculate that, I never gave that much thought because it really wasn't that important. But yeah, everybody knew, including advertisers, knew there was duplication. Advertisers didn't believe when Nitro got a 5 and Raw got a 5 that there was actually, a 10 rating out there watching wrestling. Nobody believed that.
Well, nobody believes that this is the second most watched pro wrestling match of all time. Lodi and Saturn taking on High Voltage here. Sling Blade is our referee. They're going to go 5 minutes and 14 seconds. And on the other side of this is where we see the DDP interview with Roddy Piper. That really set the high watermark for the entire freaking show. I mean, I don't know that I would have guessed that either, that the highest rated segment was a promo. But it's
unusual, isn't it? Promos generally are, they're kind of a necessary evil. Very rarely they can happen. If you've got somebody like a Ric Flair or Hulk Hogan or Steve Austin who's been off TV for a while and is now coming back, and the first time you see him in a promo, you're going to bet that promo is going to get a big number. But just as a normal course of business, typically promos would lose audience, or at the very best hold an audience. Very rarely do they gain audience.
I'm excited for us to talk about modern stuff. We'll do that during the Piper DDP promo. But High Voltage, man, I've sort of tongue in cheek referenced them as the Saturday Night Tag Team, but man, they checked all the boxes. So I understand that these guys are power plant guys, but they look like professional wrestlers. And I mean, they look like, I forget if that's Rage or Chaos right now, but the guy who just threw Saturn, he looks like he's Braun Breaker's uncle.
I was just going to say, there's a lot of similarities between them and the Steiners.
I could have seen, and I understand that positioning is everything, and timing is really everything, and positioning is probably a number 2, but with a different name, a different gimmick, a different presentation, a manager, I don't know. Like, these guys check all the boxes. They just seemingly never really got the opportunity. But I don't know. It feels like there could have been more there. For instance,
it's also timing, Conrad. You can't just take a team out of the power plant, no matter how good they are technically, and put them on TV and think they're going to get over. It takes time. I've said this many times before, but if you take Rock, set him off to the side, you take Goldberg and set him off to the side, because I think both of them were benefited so much from just the peak and popularity of wrestling and the talent that was around them to help get them over. But put them off to the side. Everybody else that you can think of that really is main event level or upper third of the roster had probably been in the business for 8 or 10 years before they got there. It takes time, not so much to learn the art. That takes time too. Otherwise, you're just going through the motions and having a match, which just doesn't generally create a lot of emotion. But I think the wrestling audience is so demanding in a way. You've got to earn their respect. No matter how good you are, you've got to be around for a minute before they finally really accept you as a legitimate, viable player. And that just comes with time. And these guys, like you said, they're fresh out of the fucking power plant. Now they're on, primetime television in front of 8 million people. It takes a minute.
It's fascinating to think, in an alternate universe, what could have been. But here it is. Lodi gets the win. Lodi and Saturn have just won the second most watched wrestling match of all time. Meltzer would say, no heat at all. Show was already killed by this point, although Saturn did a good job. It's funny. We're just writing the show off right away. By the way, it sets every record there ever was, but people hated it. Okay. They're taking a break. We will too. Something that you and I hate for sure is throwing our money away and not even realizing that we're doing it. And I have to admit, I wasn't sure that this even applied to me. I was shocked. Saved nearly $1,000 a year. And you can too with our friends at Rocket Money. I tell you what, man, I thought for sure when I heard, well, they help you cancel unwanted subscriptions. I'm like, well, dude, I want all my subscriptions. I'm using everything. What I didn't realize is like my wife and I both signed up for Hulu, but we watch TV together. We don't need 2 Hulu accounts. She thought we were using her account. I thought we were using my account. One of us was wrong, but now we're both saving money. It's not just that. How about DAZN? I came out of pocket and signed up for the big monthly subscription. I wanted to watch one fight. Like a year later with Rocket Money, I realized I've been paying for this every month and didn't even know it. That alone was like $70 a month. Dude, you can save so much money with Rocket Money. It blew my mind because I thought for sure I'm on top of this. Well, it turns out like 80% of people have subscriptions they've forgotten about. You know the deal. Sign up and try it for free and see if you like it. You can cancel anytime. And then we just freaking forget. Well, it turns out the average person has like 12 of those paid subscriptions, and you might not even remember like half of them. It doesn't just cancel your unwanted subscriptions, by the way. Rocket Money can help you keep track of all your expenses so you know where your money is actually going. And most people think they're spending like $80 a month on their subscriptions, but in reality, that number's closer to 200. And when you've signed up for so many things like streaming services you used to just watch one show, or free trials for delivery that you don't use, or maybe it's a gym membership you forgot about, or some fitness app you don't even use anymore, well, Rocket Money can help. It's a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending and it helps you lower your bills all in one place. And with Rocket Money, you can easily cancel the ones you don't want. You just press one button, bam, they do the rest. No more long hold times, no more emailing with customer service trying to get them to take care of it. How about this? Rocket Money, and this is something I didn't know until recently, they can even negotiate to help lower your bills for you by up to 20%. All you have to do is take a picture of your bill and Rocket Money will take care of the rest. Rocket Money also lets you monitor all your expenses in one place. They recommend custom budgets based on your past spending. They'll even give you a heads up and send you a notification once you've reached your spending limits that you set. Man, they're really somebody you want in your back pocket. With over 3 million users and counting, they're bragging that they're saving their customers over $720 a year on average. How much can you save? Find out right now for free and stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and manage your money the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/83weeks. That's rocketmoney.com/83weeks. Try it right now, folks. It's rocketmoney.com/83weeks. I saved so much cash with this, Eric. It blew my mind. I thought for sure I'm on top of this. But dude, we both had Hulu. I can't imagine how many other people are doing the exact same thing Megan and I did.
Yeah, I think my number, and it's been about 6 months since I did it, but I think I was up over $300 a month on stuff that I forgot I had. It's like 340 or 360 or something like that. It was a lot. And the other thing that I like about Rocket is one of the reasons why you say, oh, you get 30 days free, and then you give them all your information. And of course you forget about it, as you pointed out. And then when you do remember and you go back to unsubscribe, it's not that easy. And some places make it far more difficult than others. That's another reason I love Rocket, is tell them what you want eliminated and they do it. It's easy.
Check it out, Rocket Money. You're going to love it. Something else that you're going to love is this old DDP interview. Let's roll that beautiful bean footage here in 3, 2, 1, play. So DDP is going to do a promo. He's going to call out Roddy Piper. Piper's going to start ripping on Bret Hart until the Giant comes out, and the Giant's going to get handcuffed and taken out by security. We're heavy on story here, and we got so many top stars. I mean, think about this, guys. We started the show with Hulk Hogan. Oh, by the way, the Ultimate Warrior's here, and so's Kevin Nash, and so's DDP, and so's Roddy Piper, and I mean, just on and on and on. And we're teasing the big return for Ric Flair. So there's a lot of talent here. We're trying to stretch as much of that as we can across the 3 hours. But that's something that we're battling with in modern wrestling too. We've got so many stars, and we've got, in the scheme of things, so little amount of time to get everybody on TV. Because just like you guys had 5 hours a week back then, AEW has 5 hours a week now. Of course, they've got 2 hours on Wednesday, 1 hour on Friday, and 2 hours on Saturday. Collision, the ratings we're in, was the lowest rated Collision thus far. And I guess the best rating was the announcement from Tony Khan that Punk is no longer going to be a part of the program, and he's been released from AEW. And it just sort of went down from there. As I understand it, the segment that did best was the segment with Dennis Rodman returning to the United Center. So I'm glad they got that moment. But man, you and I haven't talked this week, but man, my phone blew up about our conversation last week about AEW. I'm curious what feedback you got about our discussion about CM Punk and AEW.
It's funny because the hardcore AEW, well, it's all they are is hardcore AEW fans. They don't have anybody outside a hardcore fan base because that's what they produce their show for. It's the Dave Meltzer dirt sheet universe that is predominantly the AEW audience. And anytime that I'm critical of AEW, even if it's my attempt to be constructively critical, I get overwhelmed with the kind of stupid ass comments and questions that one of our previous listeners sent in, questioning the story of this particular episode, which I think you just covered, and when you said it was heavy on story. But surprisingly, almost all of the responses I got on social media agreed with me. There were some that disagree. There were some, the snarky, Dave Meltzer wannabes, dirt sheet wannabes, some of those guys, of course, were critical of what I had to say and what we talked about. But the vast majority, I would say 80%, were in agreement. Some vociferously. That's a good word. Vociferously. So yeah, it was surprising, but it should be obvious that it was time to make a move. There was no happy ending in that story. How about you? What kind of reaction did you get?
People in the business. Not a lot of people were happy that we talked about it, but I mean, we had to talk about it. It kind of is what it is. And
What do you mean they weren't happy that we talked about it? We're supposed to pretend it didn't happen.
Well, I think,
but I'm curious. Tell me. You don't have to name a name, but what what was the bitch? What were they unhappy about?
Well, as you know, everything we say on this show gets cut up and turned into a bunch of different news articles across the wrestling landscape. And there were some quotes that were directly attributed that were really, when we're talking about the narrative and the rumor and innuendo and the common beliefs, but really that nobody ultimately knows. The only people who really know, and you pointed this out last week, what happened, are Tony Khan and CM Punk. And outside of that, it's a lot of hearsay. And it led to like some wrestling beefs where, you know, this camp people believed were getting their information from one side, and well, this camp, they believe they were getting their information from the other side. And I'm talking about, when I say camps, I mean news websites. But when the story becomes more about who's reporting it rather than what they're reporting, I think we kind of lose focus of what's important. And I really hope that we haven't seen the last of CM Punk in professional wrestling. I don't think that wrestling fans are done with him. And I think all the metrics would prove that. It's a function now of what he wants to do next. And I talked about that with Jeff Jarrett last week on his podcast, My World. And I said, could you see him doing something, you know, in Mexico for AAA with Triple Mania? Could you see him doing something with New Japan and doing something at the Tokyo Dome? That might be challenging because both of those companies have relationships with AEW. So do you think he does something with his pals at Impact Wrestling? Because he did show up at an Impact show, and as I understand it, he's friends with some of the folks in management there, and he's been there before. He kind of started his career there. Or could you see him, where most people will assume, maybe he does something with WWE? And Jeff said, no. He thinks maybe Punk could just do his own thing. And I don't think by do his own thing, he means go get a network TV deal and start his own wrestling promotion, but run a handful of shows a year where he's sort of the top star and the promoter, maybe like a quote unquote Ric Flair's indie super show, if you will. And I wanted to get your take on that because I got tagged in that a lot this last week with people saying, oh, you should promote a show with Punk. I mean, I'm not itching to go promote wrestling, but I am curious from your perspective, what do you think Punk does next?
I don't know the man. I never had a syllable of conversation with him, so I have no insight as to what his goals and aspirations are. And I think a lot of it has to do with how much money's he got in the bank. If he's sitting on a pile of cash and he's not financially motivated or doesn't feel the need from a financial perspective to make a move, well, that's a factor and a variable. Doing your own thing, promoting your own show. I mean, if you're passionate about it, you really want to do it, and it's fun for you, and you like that sort of thing, have at it. But it'll last once or twice. It'll be a failed experiment. It just is what it is. The cost of doing it well and promoting it well, it's such a high risk, little reward opportunity that unless you're doing it because it's your passion, it's probably not going to be a long-term solution. I feel a little differently. And again, I don't know Phil. I know the character CM Punk, but I don't know the person Phil Brooks. I just think this is just human nature. If Phil wakes up this morning and said, and again, this is what I don't know, and says, wow, how old is he? 40 some, 30, late 30s?
I think he's 44, 45.
Okay. He's 44 years old. He's got another 25, 30 years of kicking around this planet where he's going to want to have some bucks in the bank, right? So unless he's got enough money sitting in the bank right now where he doesn't have to worry about the next 25 years, at some point he's going to wake up. Trust me, I do it every day. You wake up and you go, oh man, I got to make something happen here. Now, depending on how intense that pressure is on him, determines a lot. But if he comes to the realization that, okay, I can't live off of the mystique that I created in WWE any longer. The thing with AEW didn't work out. There's not a lot of other places to go. I like the idea, Impact and all that. Great. They don't have two nickels to rub together compared to what Phil was making in AEW or probably what he made in WWE. It becomes a financial issue at some point. If Phil were to wake up and just have a cup of coffee and realize that, okay, I kind of think I fucked up a little bit. At least it's 50% of my fault. I could have done things better. I mean, we can all say that. Every time we wake up in the morning, we could have gone through the day before and done it better if we really thought about it, right? So if Phil wakes up and says, okay, I'm 44 years old, I've still got 3 or 4 years in my tank of being able to go out and make millions of dollars a year. If I can convince people that I recognize what I did wrong, I want to correct it, and I want to make the most of the last 3 or 4 or 5, whatever he's got left in the tank, at least 3 years for sure. I think if Phil sat down with Paul Levesque and had an honest conversation and just laid it on the table and left his ego back in Chicago and just really had a heart-to-heart, honest conversation and was able to convince Paul that he really did want to end his career on a high note, I think that that's a possibility. I really do. We've seen it before in WWE. The culture has established, the WWE culture, whether it's Vince. I think Paul Levesque, I've known Paul forever, but I don't know him really, really well. I just know that he's a really smart guy and he's seen a lot. And I think that Paul would be reasonable. And again, it would all come down to Phil Brooks being able to convince Paul that he's sincere. That's the part that's going to be the most difficult part of whether or not Punk has another chapter in his story or not. I think these other opportunities, whether it's Impact in New Japan, what did they gross? $33 million last year. Gross. That's not profit. That's gross sales, $33 million or something close to that. They're not going to be able to afford Punk in any significant way. Impact, same thing. They just don't have the budget. So there's not real viable financial opportunities, especially compared to what he was making in AEW or, like I said, what he made in WWE. So I think it all comes down to money and aspirations. I would hope, not knowing Phil Brooks at all, I would hope that at some point soon, he recognizes that the clock is ticking, and more than that, recognizes that he is in absolute control of the final chapter of his professional wrestling story. And I would think that he would want that to end on a high note. That's what I hope happens. Whether or not it does, who knows? But I think that's the most viable option for Punk. Otherwise, he'll just fade away. He'll make an appearance here, make an appearance there. He could probably make a killing doing personal appearances and signing autographs. I'm sure if he went over to the UK right now, he could pull 25 or 30 grand, in an afternoon, and you can do that for a while, until that wears off, a couple of years of that. And everybody that wants an autograph has got one. Everybody that wants a picture's got one. So you can live off that for a little while, but long-term, writing the end of closing the chapter out on your career on a high note, I hope that that's his biggest motivation. And I hope that Paul Levesque would sit down and have that conversation with him. I just don't know how much real heat Phil has behind the scenes, because you don't want to turn your roster inside out and create a bunch of drama and have a bunch of unhappy people if you can avoid it, and that'll be probably based on some comments that I've heard recently. That'll take a little bit of time and effort to get the roster to accept him. I'm sure there were people there that would love to see him back, by the way. And I've heard some of those comments from some of those people, but I've also heard comments from people who I trust, who I've known a long time and who are credible, not the Dave Meltzer dirt bags of the world, but people that I know well. And there are some issues there, but I don't think they're issues that can't be resolved. Very rarely are there issues that can't be resolved unless you've got really stubborn, egomaniacal people involved.
Speaking of egomaniacal people, we got one on the mic here. Let's listen to Scott Steiner and hear what's going on here with this other character.
And you can see
I brought my world famous doctor with me again. But you see, I still have a problem with that pencil pushing piece of trash, J.J. Dillon, questioning the seriousness of my injury.
This is awesome.
So I not only got one doctor, I'm going to have a panel of doctors to prove that I'm not 100%. Now, Doc, I understand you flew in that doctor in tonight from where?
Jamaica, man.
And this guy's good, right?
Right on.
What's this guy's name?
Dr. Juju Ubangi.
And he's good. And he's here tonight.
Right on, right on.
Well, come on down, Dr. Ubangi, and come on and show J.J. Dillon what it's all about. Come on down.
The doctor has no pants on.
That should matter to you right now.
That would make me leave the office. What is...
Don't worry, man. Be happy. Oh, hello, man.
So now we've got Buff Bagwell coming out as a Jamaican doctor.
I'm here to heal. Big Papa Buck. Please, don't touch me.
I don't know what to say here.
You can say he's about as legit as the other quack in the ring.
Hey, he's Buff Bagwell.
And the audience is on their feet. They love it. Look, there is no one sitting down.
Of course I knew that.
This is him, right? Let me introduce myself, man. Juju Ubangi. Hello. Hello, Americans. Yes. Big Papa Pup, it's my understanding that J.J. Dillon seems not to understand business. Am I right? That's correct. As you know, Dr. Cecil Swartz, a personal friend of mine, one of the best doctors in the world today. But you know what, Big Papa Pup? I'm gonna heal you, but I got to have you concentrate on me, man. Can you do this? Concentrate.
This is awesome.
Dude.
It is so stupid. It is so fucking stupid. It's great.
Meltzer says Rick Steiner showed up and everyone ran away. I hope somebody out there thinks having Scotty go out there and do these lengthy, poorly delivered superstar Billy Graham mid-70s is entertaining, because the crowd was booing this in a bad way, and that wasn't heel heat they were getting. It was, this show rots heat. I don't know, man.
Are you hearing that, Conrad? Do you hear what Dave heard?
On to this. How much more do we have to endure this?
My goodness. My goodness.
Now listen, man. Last week, you could not hold this left arm up. Now please, show the people that Big Papa Pump is okay to wrestle that stupid dog-faced gremlin. Hold it up, Big Papa Pump, please. He's healed. He's healed. Thank God for Jamaica, man. Jamaica, man. He's healed, and I'm buff, and I'm the stuff.
So there you go, Eric. We had a little fun with the silliness here. We know that we're setting up Rick Steiner coming out. This pairing would continue through, I guess, the rest of the year, Buff Bagwell and Scott Steiner. I liked them as a duo. I know that a couple of months after this, I guess in November, they bring out Scott Steiner's mom. And I actually found out over this past weekend at StarCast that Scott Steiner's mom was actually played by Lash LaRue. And so that was actually Lash's first time on Nitro. That would have been November of 98. He didn't actually make his on-screen debut for you guys until February of 99. So you had a lot of fun with these type skits and segments. Who saw the value? I mean, this is before Vince Russo's here. Somebody is a big advocate for this pairing and them doing these sort of outside of the box things. Was that you? Who was?
I think we
fan?
all were. We
Yeah.
all were. Look, Scott Steiner. I mean, some of the stuff that Scott did back in the day has gone on to become kind of cult classic stuff. It was highly, highly entertaining, bizarre as it may be, and such a departure from the character that Scott Steiner, portrayed before when he was part of the Steiner Brothers tag team. He was just such a straight down the middle kind of character. Here I don't know what he is. He's not quite a stand-up comedian, but he's funny as fuck. And it was so different. But I think I don't think there was any one person that was like, wow, Buff Bagwell and Scott Steiner, that might be a good team. I think we all saw it. They had a good relationship. The chemistry was good. They were close friends. They fed off of each other very, very well. It was almost like it was just a natural pairing.
We love that natural pairing. I feel like we should take a time out right now to tell everybody about another national or natural pairing. Every single day, you said CM Punk is going to wake up and say, do I have enough money to make it to the end of my life? And every single day, I know what you wake up and do, Eric. You say to yourself, where's the athletic greens? I need to start this day right. I need one scoop of those delicious AG1s, and bam, I'm hooked up. That's all it is. One scoop and a cup of water, and you're going to set yourself up for success. It's a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food source nutrients. You see, AG1 replaces your multivitamin and your probiotic and more, all in one simple drinkable habit. Think of it as a micro habit with macro results. It's whole body health. And this is really your foundation. And I would like to consider it like a foundational nutritional supplement. It gives you a comprehensive solution that checks all the boxes. And how does it do that? 75 different high quality ingredients that are going to set you up for success. They're going to support energy and focus and strength and clarity. It's something my wife has been using for a long time. She was doing it long before the pandemic, in fact. And she felt like she was more productive in her workouts. She gets up early every morning, goes to the gym, but on her way, it's one scoop in a cup of water of AG1. She feels like she's more productive. On the off chance we're traveling and she forgets or she misses a day, she's out of her routine, she finds herself feeling like she's sort of going through the motions at the gym. She's not as productive. Now, my experience is a little different. Prior to AG1, I would have that afternoon crash, like around 3 or 3:30. No longer. I no longer feel like, man, I just can't focus anymore. My head's kind of mush. I'm not as sharp as I was in the morning. That sharpness stays with me through the end of my day. I know I'm more productive because of AG1. And if you want to feel unstoppable, if you want to feel like you're doing something good for your gut health, or maybe you hate taking pills or vitamins, maybe you want to support your immune system, if you just want to cover all of your nutritional bases every day and you want a supplement that tastes great, AG1 is for you. And if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, we recommend you try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Just go right now to drinkag1.com/83weeks. That's drinkag1.com/83weeks. Check it out. You'll be glad you did. Let's get back to Nitro here in 3, 2, 1, play. We're still not done, man. We got a lot of wrestling to cover. We've got our main event, and I think coming up next, we've got the Cruiserweight title on the line as we see Juventud Guerrero going to be defending against Evan Courageous. And we're seeing these clips of the Warrior upstairs in the top of the arena. It just feels a little Sting 2.0, does it not?
Oh, my, it just so bad. So bad. Ugh.
Not a fan of that, huh?
No.
No.
Fan of this, though. Juventud Guerrero. Big fan of Juventud's. I mean,
Me too, dude.
He was flaky as fuck back then, but he was great in the ring.
Did he ever refer to himself to you as the Juice?
I think he did. And I could be mixing that up from, you know, in my mind, I've heard him refer to himself as the Juice.
Yes.
In promos and such. And maybe in my mind, I think he actually talked about himself in the third person in that normal conversation, but I think so. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so.
Eric, something fun happened in this match. And if you're watching the crowd, you'll notice that it looks like maybe fans aren't as excited about Juventud Guerrero. And it's not because he took off his mask. It's because a couple of blonde-haired ladies took their tops off in the crowd.
Awesome.
They're going to tease that they're going to do it. And I guess it was maybe a, can you top this? And where one gal didn't go all the way, the other did. And boy, there was a pop, and everybody's paying attention to that. And they don't give a shit what Evan Courageous thinks about it. They're taking a look the other way. I mean, listen, we know that happened a lot over on the WWF channel. I mean, DX was out there basically encouraging folks to do that. I mean, there's tons of footage of them encouraging ladies to do that. That was not really something that was a big part of WCW, like as far as the characters in the ring encouraging it, but it still happened. I mean, this is a party vibe. This is, you know, these days it feels like wrestling's for kids or a bunch of late 30s, early 40 dudes, but there's a lot. This is a date night opportunity in this era. And so as a result, you have more ladies there and there's more alcohol and, well, things happen. Do you remember there being?
I think we're seeing it now in this match because a lot of the people at ringside have their back turned to the ring. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, listen, boobs are over then, now, forever together.
That's awesome.
What do you think, man? Do you remember this being a thing, like the NWO just, hey, look at you?
I mean, it did happen, but so rarely, you know, for us, and we didn't encourage it. In fact, if it would have ended up on camera, it would have been an issue. So, you know, it did happen, obviously, but not often enough, unfortunately.
It's crazy to think. I mean, I can't even imagine if we were at an AEW show and that started happening, or even a WWE house show. Just it feels like another time and place where that was.
You know, somebody, I don't know who said it to me, but it could have been Ric Flair, or Arn Anderson, or Dusty, or somebody when I first got to WCW. It's like you can really tell how over you are by the quality of the spectator that comes to the show. When you start getting attractive women coming to your show, that's a good indication that you're starting to get over. And I think there's probably some truth to that because it did certainly Nitro. You know, we saw a clip, I was probably talking over it or you were, but there was a clip of a Nitro party earlier on in the show from Ohio. And it looked like there was, 300 people at that party and they were partying. When Nitro really got hot, I often described it internally as I want the show to feel like a party. I want the show to feel like something that's going on that people will feel bad if they weren't a part of. And it became that. And a lot of that had to do with the quality of the talent that would come and sit around the ring and watch the show. And not just because I tried it, we tried it. People before me tried bringing in, hot chicks and put them in, tight shirts and lots of cleavage and let's make a point of showing them off and all that. But there's a difference, as a viewer, if it's real or not. But Nitro got to the point where it literally did feel like a great college party. And a lot of the talent that was at ringside was there because they wanted to be there, not because they were paid to be there.
Yeah. It's a fun time for pro wrestling, and it is a part of pop culture. And, I don't know that that's necessarily the case now, but I mean, revenues are higher than ever. So while it may be true that there are fewer people watching wrestling than there were back then, it does feel like it's a much more profitable time. But there are some holes, some opportunities, some room for improvement. Like as you and I are recording this, Eric, we're home stretching it for a big show at Arthur Ashe for AEW. And when they first ran that stadium 2 years ago, man, they sold it out in minutes, as I recall.
20,000 tickets in 20 minutes.
It was unbelievable. And as we're recording now, I think they've sold less than 6,000 tickets for that show.
And they've scaled it down to 12,000. So they recognize that they're not selling tickets like they were. So they cut the scale down to a little more than half, and they've only sold half of those tickets. And that shows about 6 or 8 days away.
Even this Wednesday show. So the show that'll air 2 days from now, as folks are listening to this. When I last saw, there were around 1,800 tickets sold for that, and that's not a house show. That's not a live event. This is a live television show, the A show, if you will, Dynamite. And there's a lag in ticket sales, and it feels like it's trending down. But it's hard for me to reconcile that, Eric. And I know you're going to have a reason to poke holes in that. But when we go from 81,035 paying fans on a Sunday, and then we come home to like the spiritual home of AEW and certainly StarCast and All In and all that stuff, we're at the Now Arena on Wednesday, and we've got like 3,000 tickets. I don't know how to fix that. I can't make it make sense. Like, clearly,
it's not that hard, Conrad.
Talk me through it.
I've been talking you through it for the last year and a half. And every time I do, it's like, oh, he's the old man screaming at the clouds. Blah, blah, blah. He's just fucking jealous because Tony won't hire him. First of all, I wouldn't take a job in AEW right now. Well, I won't say for any amount of money because we all know I'm a whore. But realistically, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that clown car. And the reason for that is because there is a failure to recognize what's wrong. It's simple. It's story, and it's legitimate story, not what a wrestling fan thinks is a story, or unfortunately what a lot of the talent in the ring refer to as a story. Just because you've wrestled in the past and you have quote unquote history does not mean you have a story. Story is a well-defined arc with plot points that happen along the way in a very precise manner so that they peak at certain points within that arc and they dovetail into other stories within the context of wrestling that are going on. That's what WWE is doing. It's the schematic is right in front of you. It's the inability to recognize it that is what's causing this issue. I've been saying it for a year and a half. When I first started saying it I think it was in October, November, almost 2 years ago now. It's there. The story there has to be story. That has to be the focus. It can't be dream matches, hardcore, just bleed all over the fucking place, random matches thrown together. There needs to be character development and evolution. There needs to be great story. And I said a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, if they continue to ignore that, AEW ratings are going to become flat and then deteriorate. That was almost 2 years ago. What are the ratings doing now? They're flat and they're deteriorating. If you go, Brandon Thurston posted a really interesting graphic earlier this week that talks about AEW's ticket sales. And I'll do a poor job recapping it, but I think summarizing it, if you go back and you look at all of the markets where AEW has been more than once over the course of 2 years, every one of them, there's been a deterioration in ticket sales. Some of it very significant. Arthur Ashe, probably the most significant at this point. You go from 20,000 down to about 6,000 a week before the show, and you've already scaled it down to 12. If that doesn't tell you that you're not satisfying, not only you're not building new audience, which is absolutely critical in a television show, and it's absolutely critical in a live event business. If at the very least, hold on to your audience, but they're losing them. They, meaning AEW, is losing audience in significant quantities, while at the same time, WWE is selling out live events, selling out their television shows, putting 12,000 people in for a Monday Night Raw or a SmackDown. And Tony Khan put in, 3,800 for Dynamite in Chicago? Didn't sell it out after coming off of Wembley. It's not just me screaming at the clouds. It's my perspective based on 30 some odd years of experience and both success and failure. And Tony's refusing to look at it. And until he does, he's going to experience, you just keep doing the same things over and over and over again, and you're going to get the same results over and over and over again. And you can convince yourself all you want that you're a great storyteller or a great television producer, but it's not showing up on screen, and it's not showing up at the gate, and it's not showing up anywhere else. Yeah, Wembley was a fantastic feather in Tony's cap, but that's all that it was. And you laughed at me last week when I said if they go back, maybe it was you, maybe it was somebody else, but I made the comment, yeah, they did $81,000. They should be, blowing out their shoulders, patting each other and themselves at the back for doing so, because they deserve it. But if they go back next year, they'll be lucky to hit 40 or 50,000. Not that 40 or 50,000 is a bad number, but a 30 or 40% drop is a bad number. It's just not, it's not working. And you can spin it, because not you, but the collective we spin it all we want because we like Tony and he's a swell guy. He does good things for people. And those are all things that are true, that I believe. I don't really know the man that well, but I know some of the things that he's done, as we all do. But it's not working. And until that's reconciled, until somebody admits it, and Tony has the talent to do it. He's got Bryan Danielson there. Give Bryan Danielson, give him Collision. Let him do it. You don't have to be the guy that's in charge of everything. Harvey Schiller told me, learn how to delegate. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. But at this point, there's nothing to lose. You got Chris Jericho there. Chris Jericho knows how to produce good television. Chris Jericho's way more talented than people give him credit for. We think about Chris Jericho and his talents and abilities inside of the ring, and they're massive. But it's his talent, it goes way beyond that. Give those guys an opportunity and see if it works. But if not, there probably won't be an Arthur Ashe this time next year. It'll be scaled down to 5,000 people, and they'll be lucky to sell that out. And I say that because I've experienced it. I know what happens when you don't do it. Do it meaning build story and characters.
Well, listen, they just took a break here after the Nitro party. We will too. We'll hit a timeout right now because I do want to talk about why it feels like you have such a hard on for Tony Khan and AEW and CM Punk. We'll do that on the other side. What I want to remind everybody listening is if you want an Eric Bischoff level hard on towards AEW, you need Blue Chew. Boys and girls, this episode and every episode is sponsored by Blue Chew. It's going to get you so hard, even a cat couldn't scratch it. That's what Arn Anderson told me once. I don't really know what it means, but it sounds pretty good. Is that me knocking on wood? And what kind of wood? Well, you'll have to find out when you try it. It's got the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. I'll do it again, that time with no hands. Take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the process is super simple. You sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within a few days. Seriously, it's made in the USA. It's prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. That's it knocking. Or is it knocking? I don't know. We'll have to find out. The best part, though, it's all done online. No visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Just, all day long. Come on. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. Got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code 83weeks at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is 83weeks, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast and Eric's Wiener. All right, let's get back to the show here in 3, 2, 1, and we're back on Nitro. We're home stretching it, man. We've got Goldberg coming up in a title match. We've still got our main event, and we've got Jericho, who's going to be wrestling Disco Inferno here for the TV title. This is my favorite era of Jericho. You see him strutting to the ring, sporting Monday Night Jericho shirt. He's no longer a cruiserweight champion like he was earlier in the spring. That fabulous feud he had with Dean Malenko. Now he's the television champion. He's trying to work his way up the card, and this is a real highlight. Let's track Jericho on the mic.
Welcome to Monday Night Jericho! And I know why you are all Jerichoholics. I know. It's because I am who you all want to be. I am better than each and every one of you. But as your role model, I promise to never, ever let you down. Thank you.
So here he comes, Disco Inferno. Two wrestlers, two podcasters for the TV title. Let's talk about Goldberg. He's going to be out here in a minute beating up Al Green, who used to be Kevin Nash's tag team partner. And I want to talk about what was going on just a few days prior at a house show loop with Goldberg. But before we do, I want to circle back to the AEW topic and conversation. I wondered if there are lessons that are maybe paralleling with WCW and AEW, because you said earlier in the show, very early on in today's program, we talked about Nick Lambros and that perhaps he was trying to do a power play and perhaps he wound up getting his ass reassigned as a result. I wasn't there. I don't know all the details. You shared with us what you best you could to the best of your recollection. But through that process, you said something like, I was told I needed to delegate more. I needed to carve off some responsibilities. I needed to let other people make decisions. And you even pointed to, as you call it, the cat's ass logo, the redesigned logo, as being a Lambros initiative that maybe wasn't necessary, but you were trying to embrace delegation. I don't know this to be the case, but I wonder, do you think that might be something that Tony is struggling with in AEW as well? Like this, people still talk about AEW as if it's a startup, but it's nearly 5 years old. So it's no longer, quote unquote, a startup. It was, but now it's a nearly 5-year-old business. And I wonder, that as this company has gotten bigger and they've went from no television shows to 1 to 2 to 3, and we thought maybe once upon a time we'd have 4 pay-per-views. It looks like they're going to have 7. So it just continues to grow and grow. And now they've got all these new initiatives, like trading cards and like video games and. Do you think that delegation may be an issue with Tony too? And I want to add the context of, unlike yourself back when you were running WCW, he's also helping run Fulham and the Jaguars. So he's got what would be considered 3 very, very full-time jobs, and he's just one dude. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made just on the AEW side of things. You think delegation might be something that he's struggling with as well?
Could be. I don't know what he does for the Jaguars. I don't know what he does for the soccer team or the football team in the UK. I don't know what his actual day-to-day involvement is in that. Perhaps you do. Maybe he's very little, or it could be a lot. So that's a big factor, right? So unless you know how much of his time is spent somewhere else, you don't know how much of a negative impact that could be having on AEW. Let's assume it's enough that out of a 60-hour week, it's taking 20, 25, 30 hours. That's a lot. If that's the case, then he's definitely in over his head. But I think in terms of time and just ability to focus and to really put in the energy, I think it goes beyond that. And I say this only because of things that Tony himself has said. And one of the things, when you asked me about my attitude towards Tony and AEW, it happened almost 2 years ago in November when Tony came out and I thought was extremely disrespectful to Ted Turner and to me in WCW. It didn't bother me too much because I've been hearing it now for a long time. But when Tony came out and said, if Ted Turner knew half as much about wrestling as I did, WCW would still be around. In that moment, as a result of that quote, I lost all respect for Tony professionally. I do believe he's a nice person and a good person, and he has good intentions. But professionally, I thought he made an ass of himself, and he continues to. And that really is where I came out. You may remember this. That's why I came out and said, just shut up and wrestle. Quit comparing yourself and try to convince people that you're better than WWE or you're bigger than WWE. And I came out and I said something on this show, probably the equivalent of, Tony, just shut up and wrestle.
Right.
And evidently that bothered Tony so much that he started blowing up the phone of someone who we both know. And that someone said, hey, why don't you give him a call and, apologize or say whatever you're going to say. And I did. I gave him a call and he never returned it. And that's okay. I don't feel like I'm owed anything, but it just reinforced to me the lack of respect. If you've got a bitch with me and I make an effort to call and apologize for something I said, but you'll bitch to everybody else, but you won't take the call, that says something to me. That paints a picture, whether it's right or wrong, it paints a picture in my mind. And I just think Tony sees himself or wants to see himself so badly as the Vince McMahon of WWE or the Paul Heyman of ECW or even the Eric Bischoff of WCW when it was successful. Tony wants or needs that recognition so badly that I don't think, whether it's because he's so immersed in other things or distracted or if he's really just driven by his ego so much that he's not making those decisions or those choices to let other people who, by the way, unlike the parallel, with Nick Lambros was an attorney who wanted to be the vice president of marketing. It's like the vice president of marketing that wants to be an attorney. It doesn't work. But Tony has people around him at this moment that are so much more experienced and probably way better at creative and understanding the wrestling audience. Because Tony, I think, understands the wrestling audience that in his mind he was. He's writing for himself. He's writing for 14-year-old Tony Khan, who was showing up at ECW events and writing to the things that stimulated him at that point in time that he liked. It's not uncommon, but he does not understand television. He doesn't understand storytelling. He understands what he enjoys, and it's not the same thing. And when you've got such a wealth of experience at your fingertips, it's not, I want them to succeed. I don't have a hard on for them. I want them to succeed. What I get upset about is loss of opportunity and blowing opportunity. And Tony has such a fantastic opportunity right now and has had, but he keeps going down this same path that isn't working. And it drives me nuts. It's not my money. I have no dog in the hunt. I don't really care. It gives me something to talk about when I do podcasts and stuff. So I guess that's great for me, but it's such a waste. It's right there for him. All he's got to do is go, you know what? I'm going to let somebody else take control of one show. Give him 6 months. If it doesn't work, then go back to doing what you were doing because that already wasn't working. You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. That's not having a hard on for Tony Khan. That's not having a hard on for AEW. That's my honest perspective. And I give it when I'm asked. When I leave this studio, when I walk away from this microphone, AEW will not cross my mind until the next time I sit in front of this microphone. Unless something really big happens and it catches my eye on social media. But I really wanted to succeed. I know I sound like I don't. If I heard myself, if I was somebody else and I listened to me, oh, fuck, he just hates everybody. But it's actually the opposite of that. Whatever.
No, I know that because you and I have talked a lot off air about, how good it is for the business. And I mean, I know that there are people who listen to this show who really like when you quote unquote dunk on Tony. But you and I both agree that he's been a net positive for wrestling and the people in wrestling. Like he's really done some amazing things, but I think you're trying to offer critiques and criticism where you think it just could be better. And you're trying to hope that maybe folks learn from some of your mistakes and the lessons that you learned in WCW. And, maybe a friend of mine told me recently, salt and sugar are the same color. And sometimes they get confused for one another. But I think your criticisms more often than not come from a good place. And, I, for one, I hope that that AEW continues to grow and thrive. And it does feel like, ticket sales are in a bit of a lull now domestically, but not internationally. And maybe it was because it was a new market and that sort of thing. But I'm really, really pulling for them because I watched the show the other night and I really enjoyed the show. It felt like I enjoyed it. But I understand what you're saying about, hey, maybe we do need some deeper stories. Maybe it needs to be, and I think, they've got some great stories going right now. It's a question of, can they keep that momentum going? We'll see. Here's how you know it's going to be a big Nitro. Michael Buffer comes out in his white jacket. We got some big time stars coming in. Before we watch this main event and talk about it and chop it up, I want to mention something that happened in Indiana in late August of '98 here. Goldberg versus Giant was advertised as the dark match main event in both Terre Haute, who I screwed that name up, and Peoria. Sometime back, Goldberg had asked for both of those days off, and JJ gave him the days off. Somehow, with the typical great communication internally, the promotions department never knew that and continued to advertise him. Nobody even knew there was a problem until the day of, when they realized the only advertised match was Goldberg versus Giant, and Goldberg wasn't there. The Providence deal turned into a disaster, as the original thinking was that maybe 40% of the 7,000 who paid would actually go to the box office that week and ask for refunds. But as it turned out, all but 1,800 got refunds. So the idea of what they were doing in Providence was ruled out, although WCW didn't again do itself any favors by never booking a firm return date to Providence for fans to use those tickets, and instead just refunding them. So instead, a decision was made not to inform the crowd here in Indiana about Goldberg not being there, and basically warm up the cars and sprint out of the building like Earl Hebner in Montreal after Page and Hennig was the match that went on last, and it was over before anyone in the crowd even realized what was up. And then they started throwing furniture. Basically, Goldberg had to be practically begged to appear in Peoria, and he did come, but he wasn't happy about it. And it made it doubly screwy for him because WCW had booked him for the main event in Peoria at the end of a 4-hour taping. And then he had to be on all sorts of media appearances in New York City early the next morning as a part of the Nassau Coliseum ticket kickoff sale. So they had to charter a jet for him for $11,000. Now, this is one of those growing pain type scenarios. Again, it's not a startup. This is WCW. They've been around for a long, long time. But we've got him advertised, but we've also granted him the day off, and now we've got to try to make chicken salad. I'm sure this is just left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, as we say here in the South, but that seemed to be pretty commonplace at times. Was there just not enough, infrastructure to make sure that didn't happen?
I don't know that it was commonplace, number one. I don't know that the recap of this scenario is even close to what really happened. Who wrote that?
Dave Meltzer.
Okay. Enough said. Dave is a bitter little bitch, and he always had an issue with me and WCW. I mean, it could be true. It could not be true. There could be parts of it that are true, but none of us know. And I'm not going to comment on a Dave Meltzer fucking recap of anything because you just don't know how much of it is real and how much is just Dave menstruating. I mean, he's were there issues? Of course there were. Were there breakdowns of communication? There are in every company. Yes, it did happen, especially when we started really growing fast. Let's take a look at the growth. Was it a startup? Was WCW a startup? In many ways, it absolutely was not. But effectively, it was. From the day I took over in about 1993 to about 1996, you've got a 3-year window when we went from $25 million in annual sales to $300 million in annual sales, or close to it. While it's technically not a startup, effectively it is, because it's an entirely different business. And some of it operated fairly well. Some of it didn't. Some of it was an issue because travel, for example, wasn't coordinated through WCW. It was coordinated through Turner Travel. So there were always issues that would come up from time to time. But I can't comment on the details of what Dave Meltzer had to say, nor should anybody in their right mind. Dave wasn't there. I guarantee you Dave wasn't at the fucking building. So where did that information come from? And by the way, it's not Terry Hott. Terry Hott was a stripper in Terre Haute.
Listen, we got a bunch of different questions about our main event here. Dylan Leahy wants to know, did Eric think Brett was checked out of wrestling by this point, or did he still think that Brett had something to offer to WCW?
Oh, it's hard for me to reflect back on where Brett was or I was with relationship to Brett. I think I was still very hopeful that we could pull it together, but there was, and I've talked about this before, and I know Brett doesn't want to hear this, and neither do fans of Brett. And I want to make it clear before I say what I'm about to say, I've got a ton of respect for Bret Hart and what he accomplished and his role in the industry and what he was able to do. That said, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, the Bret Hart that came to WCW was not the same Bret Hart that was in WWE, based on people that worked with him in WWE. There was a lot going on with Bret, and a lot of that was my responsibility and my fault, and some of it was Bret's responsibility and Bret's fault. But I couldn't tell you in August of 1998, what the chemistry was at that point. I couldn't.
We should do another one here from Instagram, a wrestling historian. He wants to know, what was your reaction to finding out you got a 6.0 rating?
I don't remember, but probably wasn't that surprised. We were hovering around 4s even in competition at this point. I think maybe sometimes greater than 4+. So a 6 was awesome, but it wasn't like, oh my God, I can't believe we did a 6 rating. It was probably more than anything along the lines of, well, that's kind of what we expected. That would be my guess.
Great one here from Francis Reyes. What did you think of Ernest the Cat Miller's robe, and did the company design that for him? That feels like it's just right out of the personal collection of Ernest the Cat Miller to me.
I don't know if we designed it for him, but he would have had a hand in it. It was so Ernest Miller. I thought everything about Ernest was entertaining. Still do. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to be doing a watch along of a trailer that Ernest Miller and Glacier it was involved with. They've got a new movie coming out, and I just talked to Evan Polisher yesterday, and we're going to kind of review the trailer and talk about that movie. I can't wait. Is Ernest Miller and Ray Lloyd, two amazingly quality people, high quality people, and I look forward to it. But I think anything Ernest Miller does is pretty entertaining. If you just sit down with him and have dinner, yes, you will find yourself laughing your ass off. You could go into a Ruth Chris Steakhouse in the worst mood in the world, kind of like you are when you get done recording with me. You could be in a horrible, shitty mood because you just, and you sit down with Ernest Miller and you'll be laughing your ass off in 15 or 20 minutes. That's who Ernest Miller is.
We should also mention this main event we're watching that everybody thought would set the record. It actually didn't. It was that interview with Dallas Page and Roddy Piper. And then, of course, the high voltage tag. The high voltage tag did more than this one did. But we've got sort of the faces, if you will, the top baby faces of WCW back in the day, Sting and Lex Luger. So when we're talking about, we'll call it late 80s, early 90s WCW, man, those were the top 2 baby faces. Now on the other channel, Hulk Hogan and Bret Hart were the top 2 baby faces. And now they're all facing off here. We got Tomato Face Sting tagging up with Lex Luger in black jeans, taking on Hollywood Hogan and Bret Hart. This is can get here, no?
I wonder if the fact that this wasn't the highest rated episode of the show, I think that had a lot to do with being so late into the third hour, because you do get off audience fatigue in and around 10 o'clock. It's hard to hold an audience after 10 o'clock at night. It's my only explanation, because just the name power alone should have done better than it did, obviously.
It's a big time main event. I mean, you want to talk about star power, it's just dripping off of it. And I've always wondered, and I know we've talked about it before, but I can't help but think, man, what if with Bret? His career cut way too soon after, the injuries required him to step away from the ring. But we never got to see the big pay-per-view main event with him and Hogan. I'm not saying it necessarily would have been the best match ever, but it is one of those that just feels like it got away from us. And we talk about things
the match might not have been the best, to your point, but Brett could have made Hulk look pretty good if that was the goal. Brett had that skill set, much like Ric Flair, can pretty much make anybody look great. The build that could have been, though, that's the part that I think I regret more than anything, is had the focus been there, had the commitment been there, had the chemistry been there, a couple variables going on there, but had everything been right, the build, the story, I'm not saying it could have been a Sting kind of build, but it could have been damn close, maybe better. That's the part that I regret.
Well, something you won't regret is signing up for adfreeshows.com. You get all of our shows early and ad-free over there. There's more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts, starting at just $9 a month. That's like less than 20 cents an episode each month. But that's not all. There's tons of extra bonus content, not just audio, but video as well. Things you can't hear anywhere else, like the book with David Crockett, or The Insiders, or Ask Conrad, or Monday Mailbag with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick. Or how about the brand new series, Tuesdays with the Taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan? And we just announced, I can't believe this is real, we've got a Hacksaw Hour. And they tell me there's another Hall of Famer that we've got up our sleeves as well. It's more content than you can shake a stick at, and it's all exclusive to adfreeshows.com. You get to be a part of the live recordings that we do. We call it our live studio audience. You can also do live Q&A chats for our bonus episodes. You get to interact and be on camera asking your favorite wrestling legends like Tony Schiavone or Eric Bischoff or Jim Ross questions. And how about watch-alongs with your favorite hosts? You can be a part of all that and a lot more over at adfreeshows.com. By the way, if your business targets men that are 25 to 54 years old, there's no better place to advertise than right here with us on 83 Weeks. You've heard us do some of the same ads for the same companies year after year. Why is that? Well, because it really works. If you're looking for dudes, we got them. And with our super targeted audience, there's very little waste. Go right now to advertisewitheric.com and find out more about how affordable it is to advertise here on 83 Weeks. You can also pick up Eric's new book, Grateful, available now over on Amazon. Love to have your interaction and your feedback. If you think we've earned it, throw us a like, hit the subscribe button, leave us a 5-star rating on the platform that you listen to us on, whether it's Apple or Spotify or wherever. You can also interact with the show and ask questions like the ones we've read off from listeners today at 83 Weeks over on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. And the easiest, best, and cheapest way to support the show is just to subscribe to our YouTube. Check it out if you haven't already. It's 83 Weeks on youtube.com. It's one thing to hear Eric's rants. It's another to see them. And speaking of seeing Eric, you can see Eric in a whole lot of new merch over at boxofgimmicks.com, including the now infamous Mucker Further hoodie and so much more. We got some big gold stickers. We got some Yeti cups, some tank tops, some hats, some beach towels, something for everybody at boxofgimmicks.com. Personally, we're on all the social media platforms. He is at E Bischoff on Twitter. I am at Hey, it's Conrad. On Instagram, he's at the real Eric Bischoff. I'm at Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. And we're both on Facebook at E Bischoff and Hey, it's Conrad. So greatly appreciate you guys checking out and hanging along with a fun ride here. Man, this is the high water mark for Nitro. Who would have thought? August 31st, 1998, a ratings record over a 6. Dude, that's just crazy. And can you imagine if SmackDown pulled a 6 some Friday night? People would lose their mind.
Have you heard, speaking of SmackDown, have you heard anything about the license agreement negotiations? Is that still kind of just floating around out there in the ether?
It is. And I think that it's something that they were probably trying to get in front of with this new merger, which, you know, what's funny is I've heard conflicting stories on that. I've heard some people said, hey, man, they'd be lucky to get that done by the end of the year. And then I've seen other people who say, oh, no, it'll be done by the end of September. What do you think?
The merger?
Yeah.
It'll be done Tuesday.
Oh, that's it, huh? Tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, this Tuesday, or maybe, no, September 12th.
Yeah. So this Tuesday. Tomorrow
is what I read recently, and I think that was an announcement from WWE to their staff via email, which made its way out into social media. But yeah, I think it's going to close on September 12th, which is, I think it closed faster than I suspected. or gassed, I shouldn't say suspected. Thought it might take a little longer, but it went relatively quickly for the, the scope, the size of the merger.
I feel like we should at least acknowledge it as folks are listening to this. Unbelievably, today is September 11th, or as we call it here in America, 9/11. And it's the anniversary of, I guess, the greatest tragedy we've ever had here in America. The attack with those planes in New York City and the towers, and my goodness. Reflecting on things like that, it brings a little clarity to, hey, is any of this wrestling shit really all that important? I mean, a lot of people lost a whole lot more than a ratings point that day. My goodness.
Indeed. And it's still something that, I know here in Cody, there was a big event this morning at the Buffalo Bill statue. There are 55 steps from the ground up to the top of the statue. And there's a lady here in town that put together an event, and she invited everybody in Cody to come down, and they're going to run whatever it is, they're going to run it to equal the number of steps that the firefighters had to run up during that fire. So there's still people commemorating that event in a very, very meaningful way today in large towns, small towns like Cody, Wyoming. Still matters, and as it should. People should remember and never forget. You see Tunnel to Towers, I should say, is doing amazing things for first responders and families of first responders and people who have lost their lives or limbs in war. Still doing a lot of great things today. So it kind of does remind you of what's actually important and what is really nothing more than sheer entertainment.
Shout out to the friends and family that were impacted by that and served as first responders, and just brings a little focus to what's really important today. So I hope we all take a minute today and just remember, where we were and those who paid the ultimate sacrifice and those who are no longer with us, because, listen, we like to hoot and holler on this show and play a little grab ass every now and again about professional wrestling, but in the scheme of things, none of that's really important.
But what is important as well, like and subscribe. Get us out there.
So you see the things are pulling apart here at the end. It looks like a miscommunication between Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan, and Brutus the Barber Beefcake and Brian Adams trying to get in the middle here. We're trying to lean on story. I would have loved to have seen it paid off in a big way. It never really happened. It's one of those great what ifs, I think. And here comes the smoke. Wouldn't you know it? Let's track it as we go off the air here.
The ring!
Don't go anyplace. Don't leave that set.
The ring is filling up. And the Warriors appeared again.
From where? They're all laid out.
There's bodies everywhere.
Every member of the NWO Black and White is face down. Hogan's hiding. Smell the fear?
Hogan, you can get up. We can smell your fear.
Oh, God, Conrad.
He wants no part of the Warrior.
Feet don't fail me now.
And fans,
Hogan took a powder
see you Thursday night.
and hightailed it to the back.
He couldn't wait to get the fuck out of that ring is what it was. That was horrible.
Well, Eric, I think if you're thinking what I'm thinking, we got to get AEW some good stories like that Ultimate Warrior story. That's
Tony, take a look at that. There's your template right there.
Eric, I never know what to expect when we sit down and we record, but man, it was super fun to take a look at the highest rated Nitro in all time and try to draw some parallels to what's going on with wrestling today. We'll be back next week talking all things 83 weeks with Eric Bischoff.
We had a blast at StarCast 6. A huge thank you to everyone who attended. And if you want to relive our stage show experience, you can with Premier Streaming Network. Over 20 stage shows took place StarCast weekend. From comedy shows, design panels, musical performances, talk shows, and more. Including a live edition of AEW Unrestricted with CEO Tony Khan. Sign up for Premier Streaming Network today and check out the shows available now on demand and in HD. And if you sign up today, you'll get 2 months free of Premier Plus. Enjoy the amazing lineup of content that Premier Streaming Network offers, including all 5 previous StarCast stage show lineups. Hundreds of hours of fantastic wrestling content at your fingertips. Visit StarCastOnPremiere.com.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what AdFreeShows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-Free Shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that AdFreeShows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. AdFreeShows.com.